Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Camille looked anxiously at her granddaughter. The elderly woman's excitement was so strong that she involuntarily moved the hand that was tightened by the cuffs. But the house doctor of all strictness is an elementary school teacher, Granny remarked. I asked you to lie still, and your hands are twitching. I'll have to go over it again. The patient made an expressive gesture, which eloquently spoke her displeasure. What to waste time if everything is clear? There was both despair and indignation in the older woman's voice, but Emily had long since gotten used to her grandmother's maneuvers. Paying no attention to the size of the old woman, she again pumped to the limit of the cuffs. Camille for the propriety of it and swayed, but she did not express in verbal form her feelings. She watched her granddaughter's actions, expecting a death sentence, but Emily did not justify these hopes. Grandma, can you be put on the astronaut team? 130/80. That's like a well-trained athlete, and that's at your 80s with a little tail. Camille didn't like her granddaughter's tone, not to mention the result of the study. I pretending to be gravely ill. She changed from horizontal to sitting. Your machine is lying. You can throw it away. Too bad mine broke at the wrong time. But it was always right. I can tell from my condition that my upper blood pressure is at least 200. Emily had an excellent grasp on the intricacies of her grandmother's personality and wasn't even offended by her assessment of the imported device's abilities. Okay, if you don't trust me, let me call an ambulance. Camille's face changed instantly. Her entire large body expressed outrage. With a kind of bloodthirsty triumph in her voice, she declared, "You're where the dog is buried. I knew it. I sensed you were your mother. So you want to put me in the hospital to be finally killed." Emily laughed. Grandma, hospitals treat people, and you're telling me these stories. And the fact that your mom and I are trying to talk some sense into you is a sign of caring. You have no idea how much we love you. The granddaughter hugged the woman tightly and kissed her deeply wrinkled cheeks. Camille was touched. More than anything else in the world, she treasured such moments. The weight of the years had left many wounds on the heart of the old lady, and not all of them had healed completely. So she wanted her family to pay more attention to her. Today, too, towards morning, she felt uncomfortable with the loneliness of people watching from every corner. At such moments, she became very frightened. That was why she had called Emily. But the girl did not even reproach her relative for such an early call. Remembering it now, Camille decided to apologize. "Emily, I'm sorry I got you up at 6 o'clock, but I thought the woman with the scythe was already at the bedside. I know it's time to get ready, but I just want to live a little longer. It's okay. It's okay. I have to be at work by 8 o'clock anyway. I don't like your moodiness. They say that as long as a man lives, he should think about life. Yes, I try to think, but when I look in the mirror, I get scared." Camille was obviously being flirtatious because she looked quite good for her age. Despite her old age, the woman looked after herself and liked new outfits. Her daughter and granddaughter tried to prevent her every wish, and Evelyn, Emily's mother, many times offered to move into her spacious apartment, but insistent, and the grandmother categorically rejected such a possibility. "I've never lived and I want to die in my own apartment. Stephen and I earned these square meters with our own labor." Camille liked to make her life an example to others. She used every opportunity to involve the interlocutor in her memories. While Emily was preparing breakfast in the kitchen, her grandmother did not miss the opportunity. If you knew granddaughter, what hard times were then. Hunger, devastation, unsettledness. People were happy because they valued life. Now they value money more. Emily with a tray floated into the small living room already. "Let's have breakfast. I'm really going to be late for work. You young people, all in a hurry. Where are you running to? You get married in a hurry, and then you get divorced. Emily, tell me, will I have great-grandchildren?" A conversation on the subject. It's not the first time Grandma started it, but the girl always shrugged it off. To give you great-grandchildren, I need to at least marry first. Camille set the cup aside. She gave her granddaughter a curious look. So why the case? It's not that we've lost all the men in Russia. Your grandfather, Stephen, came back from the war without one leg, and there was no shortage of brides. But your grandfather chose you, not without pride. The old woman said who else could he choose but a labor striker? I have so many diplomas, and even have awards from the government. In those days, girls like that were valued. And your grandfather, despite his disability, was still a crucible and looked at other women. So I had to be on my guard all the time. Emily knew Grandma's love story well, but every time new details came out. Camille had never said before that Stephen had a weakness for the female sex. You never told me about Grandpa's adventures, Grandma. There was a heavy sigh. You don't talk bad about the dead. He drank my blood, your grandfather. But I still loved him and forgave him. It's easy now. Anything wrong, and we're on opposite sides. We put up with it because we were ashamed. We also felt sorry for the kids. Stephen set up 3 of them at once. The women at the construction site laughed at me, saying, Camille, do you go to the maternity hospital like a job? Every year at almost the same time. That was our life, and we loved for real. Emily looked at the old walkers, which inexorably counted the minutes. Of course, Grandma, it's always nice to talk to you, but I don't want to be late for work. Don't worry about me. I want to tell you in confidence that maybe soon your wish will come true. Camille stood up cheerfully, forgetting her hypertension. Is it Emily? Tell me, who is he? Do you know what I mean? What's not to understand? Just make sure you don't tell anyone yet. The old lady winked conspiratorially. I won't. But I don't know what we'll get with John yet. He's a simple and very kind guy. He and I have been dating for almost a year now. And my mother and father know about it. Bah, I told you, you're the first person I shared my secret with. The girl quickly cleared the table and was about to leave. But having remembered something important, Grandma stopped. Why do you want to wait for your great-grandchildren? Camille sighed again very expressively. I don't know if it's true or not, but they say that a woman who is lucky enough to have great-grandchildren is forgiven all her sins. Emily laughed. I had no idea you were superstitious. That's news to me. And believing in omens doesn't add up. Life is such a thing that sometimes incompatible things happen. Whoever thought the world would turn this way before? Emily walked to the bus stop, and the last of her grandmother's remarks never left her mind. About the world being upside down. Mentally, she recognized the old lady's rightness, because really, just in the last few years things had changed a lot. Therefore, many people were still trying to preserve all the good and good that united them before. Barely the girl crossed the threshold of the office, in which 12 employees managed to coexist peacefully, as Jenna immediately at her for, Why are you late? I was just getting there. Good thing I didn't notice you were gone. Why are you like that? The friend tried to gesture. What's so surprising about Emily? She, in turn, asked what so. You can elaborate, but only brides shine like that. And Christmas trees. What kind of day is today? First my grandmother asks me early in the morning when I'm getting married. And now you. Okay, fine. I'll give you the latest information. I'm not planning a wedding just yet. I might be a Christmas tree, though. You're kidding. I'm not gonna let you go. I know you and John are serious, so I'm hoping to be your maid of honor at your wedding, even if it's just for someone else's happiness. A little bit warmed the desks, and girlfriends stood flush to each other, which allowed them to secretly, without attracting the attention of all that accounting. Emily moved even closer to Jenna. I don't get it. I thought you and Christopher were fine. To be honest, I was kind of jealous. Well, girlfriend, love is over. Tomatoes are wilted. What was the reason? Did he lie to you or betray you? No, it would take a lot of effort to lie to me. It's just that times are tough with my girlfriend, and Christopher's been scraping by on odd jobs. And I'm a young and beautiful girl, and I want a party. And preferably every day. That confession shocked Emily. What about love? Jenna looked at her friend as if she was seeing her for the first time. I didn't realize you were so naive. Love is being able to satisfy your little whims at someone else's expense. That's why I resigned, Christopher. Your John is different. You know, he's got a sense of class. Even though he's still a young man. It's weird. I thought you understood all that. That's why you're together. Emily didn't like her friend judging her boyfriend like he was a horse instead of a human being. Jenna, let's switch to work, or you and I will get cut for talking. The girl squirmed, laying down funny, but took her friend's advice. After this conversation, Emily had an unpleasant residue on her soul, but Jenna was not at all embarrassed by her friend's changed mood and her unwillingness to return to this topic. At the end of the day, she asked to be a counselor. It's so boring alone. Let's go for a walk together. Emily was uncomfortable saying no to her best friend, and she agreed to such a plan, though not very willingly. Emily had very different plans for the evening, and knowing Jenna, she knew it would be for a long time. Okay, Chuckles, I'll try to comfort you a little, but John will be waiting for me. He and I were gonna go to the movies. Jenna clapped happily. Mittens and Snowflake, yay. I haven't been to a movie in 100 years. Emily, I didn't have time to add that the two of them wanted to go together. When John saw Emily show up with her date, he didn't seem surprised, did he? He had met Jenna a few times before, but his first impression of her was negative, so he greeted her rather dryly and looked at Emily expressively. I hadn't counted on another person participating in our cultural event. Otherwise, I would have bought 3 tickets at once. Jenna was not in the least embarrassed by such a clear hint that she was the one. The third extra. The girl laughed very loudly. You can buy a term. True, it would cost 3 times as much. But the matter will be solved. She looked around and then pointed her finger at the guy standing nearby. He was standing there, staring at nothing. He had a hood over his head, his eyes and face blank. John, that man over there definitely has tickets. Young man, surprised Jenna. Are you even informed in such matters? Yes, you are dangerous to be friends with. Jenna smiled contentedly. That's how you need to one too and have an effect. On the contrary, it is very useful to be friends with me. I know this guy because I've bought clothes from him many times. He used to paint rags for a cut. John, please hurry. Emily and I are gonna turn into icicles. It's Arctic cold. Emily hadn't said a word the whole time. She didn't expect her friend to behave so swaggeringly in the presence of her beau. She hadn't noticed Jenna's habits before, such as laughing loudly or pointing her finger at people in public. She even regretted that she hadn't culturally stitched up her friend, for whom she now had to blush in front of John. Somewhere inside, a beacon went off, warning of danger. Watch out, or your best friend will steal your boyfriend. But from the look, she hadn't noticed Jenna's habits before, such as laughing loudly or pointing her finger at people in public. She even regretted that she hadn't culturally stitched up her friend, for whom she now had to blush in front of John. Somewhere inside, a beacon went off, warning of danger. Watch out, or your best friend will steal your boyfriend. But from the look of John and his mood, it was easy to guess that Jenna annoyed him a lot. During the session, her friend didn't hold back either. She commented aloud on the actions of the characters, and constantly she was cut in her seat. Therefore, Emily thickly and did not watch the picture with the participation of a famous Italian actor. Jenna, on the other hand, had quite a bit. I was so looking forward to seeing this movie. Thank you, John. She looked at him with such eyes. It made Emily uncomfortable. It seemed to her that Jenna had forgotten that John was dating her best friend. One more minute, and she'd just lash out at the guy. You're welcome. Unexpectedly, for a couple of lovers, Jenna fell out friends. I do not understand why you have such faces, as if you just had a spoon, fish, grease. Remember when they used to give us that stuff in kindergarten? Jenna laughed very loudly again. Emily just nodded her head in response to her friend's inappropriate question and wanted to say goodbye as they stood in front of Jenna's house. But she wasn't going to leave them so easily. "Guys, I understand, but I'm warning you that I will be your maid of honor at your wedding, and no other candidates will be considered. Are you satisfied that you've made your point tonight?" Jenna laughed very loudly again. John wrinkled his nose, but he said calmly, "I must disappoint you, Jenna, but Emily and I are not getting married." Instantly, the joy on the face of the girl was replaced by surprise I did not understand. "It turns out that you, John, also give up eating and not even shy to admit it so publicly." The young man very cleverly put the insolent girl in her place, and Emily watched with satisfaction as she tried to realize the meaning of his words, so that the girl would not suffer in vain. He explained Jenna's decision to abandon the noisy celebration does not mean that someone has abandoned someone, especially so you cannot talk about a person, but to say, "And we will be fine and without a loud wedding. We'll just go to the registry office and run away secretly from everyone, and we'll spend the money on something useful." Jenna was hit with another wave of surprise. It's like an American movie. They go on a trip right after Mary, too. "John, you're good." For about 15 minutes, John and Emily had to listen to Jenna's coddling for the sake of decency. The frost was starting to creep through their warm clothes. Toward the end, all three of them were jumping in place to keep warm. Finally, Jenna gave in. Tonight was going to be a good night. Maybe we could go to the restaurant with the same group. When I opened the door at the entrance, the young man breathed a sigh of relief. Emily tried to justify herself for her friend's behavior. "I'm sorry you had to put up with Jenna's jibber-jabber. She's a normal girl. It's just that today she had a meltdown. I didn't expect it to get so ugly. I've never had to deal with anything so special. What I don't understand is what you two have in common. You're so different. Well, there's no mystery. It's just that we went to kindergarten together, and then we sat at the same desk. She's always so reckless. I mean, her dad's a big shot, so Jenna's been used to getting what she wants since she was a diaper. I wish her daddy would teach his daughter some manners. I couldn't help myself when she started asking about our wedding. Sure, yeah, half of the procedure is done. And now part 2. Please, maestro, fanfare." John Fool himself played the orchestra, and then solemnly took a velvet box out of his pocket. A ring, as is proper on such occasions. The girl opened the box in the color of a street lamp, and a bright gem winked cheerfully at her. Oh, it was a real diamond. It was the happiest day of Emily's life. The girl could not sleep for a long time, recounting in her memory every minute of the wonderful evening. On that frosty February night, spring was ringing in her heart, and she believed that the best was yet to come. The first year in married life flew by unnoticed. Emily could not escape the feeling that it was all happening in a dream. The women at work made fun of her. Our Emily was giving off a vibe. You can get a free load of happiness. It's rare to find such a thing in life, that a honeymoon stretches for a whole year. The girl smiled embarrassedly and tried to guffaw. "You just pay too much attention to my person. I've never walked around with a sour face before. I always tried to find positive things, even in a private day." Jenna was the only one who didn't keep everyone's spirits up. She had once again failed in her personal life, and was now openly jealous of her friend's marital happiness. Once, during a lunch break, which they traditionally spent in a nearby cafe, Jenna even made a remark. "In vain you flaunt your prosperous life." The girl was surprised. On the contrary, it always seemed to me that happy people radiate kindness. Personally, I'm ready to share with anyone. How can I understand you, John? Will you rent your own? Jenna, I didn't expect you to say that. If you weren't my friend, I'd definitely be offended. Sometimes I get the impression that you're not happy for me or that I owe you something. Emily almost cried with resentment. So Jenna tried to remedy the situation. "Why are you so sour? You know I'm not being mean." "Well, my tongue is so bad. It's like I'm talking nonsense. No offense, Emily. It's not like I resent you, John, for not getting married. The tension was released, and both girls smiled at the end of the meal when they put down their dessert plates. Jenna asked Emily with a piercing sadness, "What is happiness? I guess it's different for each person." "You know, I recently came across a collection of poems by a poetess. Anyway, she survived the war. There was love and betrayal in her life. One of her poems struck me. It's about happiness, which this woman had spent her whole life collecting in bits and pieces. But you can't get a lot of happiness that way. It's very beautifully put, though. Yes, beautiful and right. You know, Jenna, my grandmother told me many times about her youth. Grandpa was legless, and she cut her throat for him. I'm sorry, I didn't put it well. But according to the stories of my favorite grandmother, a person was valued before, and it doesn't matter what physical defects he had. It was what was inside that mattered." Jenna looked at Emily with wide-open eyes. "Oh, come on, girlfriend. You should not sit in the accounting department and lecture at some liberal arts university. I'm gonna quit accounting soon." "What's another surprise?" "John, you got another job." "You could say that. We're about to have a new addition." This news took Jenna by surprise. She hadn't had time to prepare for it internally. And on her handsome pilot flashed a displeased grimace, but quickly pulling herself together, the girl naively became, "Emily, I'm so happy for you. I mean for you too. Of course, so much happiness, and in the same hands from it can be crazy. But if I missed your wedding, where I wanted to be a bridesmaid, then at least take me as a godmother." Emily made no promises. At those who returned from a direct answer duty phrases should still give birth, and then think about everything else. By the way, my grandmother used to say that you can't even buy clothes for a baby that hasn't been born. It's a very bad omen. And it seems to me that it's all nonsense. Dumb beliefs, as they say. What to be, that will not pass. Personally, when I get ready for motherhood, I'll prepare everything in advance for the baby. How I envy you now. I want it all too. To calm her friend, Emily advised her to have everything you will definitely have, Jenna. You just have to change your outlook on life a little. A crane in the sky looks more attractive because it is high at a distance and imperfections are not noticeable. I get the hint. But your version of a tit is definitely not going to work for me. It's easy for you to argue because your John has achieved something that others haven't. He's got a good job and a good salary. You're behind him like a wall. And the tit, that's utopia. Whoever can't get to the sky needs help. I'm not ready to be a wall for anyone. Emily was not in the habit of imposing her opinion on others. She decided that there was no point in arguing with her friend about the values of life. After this conversation, their paths began to diverge in different directions. Emily began to avoid eating together in the cafeteria, and Jenna did not insist. Soon the friend was promoted. Jenna decided to celebrate her professional triumph with a bang. Girls on such an occasion, and I do not hide the glade. The meeting place is a campground, Pines outside the city. Please don't be late. After giving out instructions, Jenna approached the table where Emily was sitting. I hope you're not from the college. The staff. But Emily pointed to her belly. Where am I going with a watermelon like that? If it were still here, then I would definitely spend time in warm company. I'm not going out of town. I don't want to take any chances. Well, what do you know? A month before her maternity leave, Emily felt ill. Her legs were severely cut off. Unsightly spots appeared on her face. After conferring with her husband, she decided to take a leave of absence. With application in hand, she entered the supervisor's office without knocking. Jenna, I have to go. Jenna gives her an unfriendly look. First of all, it's not Jenna, it's Jenna. And secondly, cultured people knock before they enter an executive's office. What's going on in there? Although the freshly minted supervisor could see Emily was having trouble standing, she didn't even offer her a chair. On the contrary, she spent several minutes studying the short text of only 2 lines. I'm sorry, but I have to turn you down. The annual report is coming up. You know that. But I have to go on maternity leave in less than a month anyway. So you'll go on vacation like you're supposed to in a month. Emily was on her way out the door when she heard the sarcastic, "So how's your happiness going?" A lot of it was collecting grains. "Don't you want to share?" Emily was struck rather not by the words, but by the intonation with which her friend spat out her gloating. But the new boss decided to continue. "Now look at you and me and tell me which one of us is happier. You're painful to look at. Sprawled out like a frog. I'm the favorite. Good position, salary, respect. I'm getting used to it, and I'll find a husband." Emily almost physically felt as if the last thread connecting her to her friend had broken. Probably, this breakup had a negative impact on her health, because in the evening of the same day she went to the hospital for preservation. John was very worried about the condition of his spouse and the future child, but the doctor assured everything will be fine. "There is no special reason to worry. It's just that your wife was a little nervous. But it'll pass for a while. She'll rest with us and go home in a couple weeks." The doctor wasn't lying. Indeed, Emily was soon discharged, and the doctor made one last joke about parting for a while. Gain strength and come back for the baby. During the time left before the birth, Emily prepared herself for future motherhood. She reread a lot of useful literature, but she liked the book by the famous American pediatrician Benjamin Term. When John caught his wife reading this treatise, he was surprised. "I see you're all set, and I'm allowed to study the references. After all, I want to be very involved too. I'm all for it. Here you go." John took the book, but it was obvious that his mind was on something else. Emily decided to help him out. "Honey, is there something you wanted to ask me?" "Is there? Listen, I was at a meeting at City Hall the other day and I was almost speechless when I saw your friend there. I think it was Jenna." "Yeah, that's the one. But I don't talk to her anymore." "Why is that, if it's no secret?" "No secret. It's just that even a little bit of power changes a person so much." "I see. I'll keep that in mind. Anatoly, I almost invited her to our house. Why didn't you tell me?" "Why? John, you yourself probably at least once in your life faced a situation when you realized that with some person you are not on the way. That's what happened with Jenna and me. Our friendship turned out to be a bubble, but I don't regret breaking up with her. It's just the bitterness that lingers. It'll pass, especially since you won't have to go back to your accounting department. Have you made up your mind for me?" "No, that I'd like to suggest a change of career. We're opening some branches soon, and we're gonna need to expand our staff." "Okay, honey, I'll think about it. But let's not get ahead of ourselves." Although the whole family was worried about Emily, a real friend and like-minded John found in the person of Camille, Emily's grandmother calmed the future father down. "Everything will be fine. All women give birth. That's our lot in life. And Emily will cope with this task." The man wanted to believe the words of a wise woman, but anxiety for his wife and child kept him on his toes. "Thank you, Camille, for your support. Your words to God's ears. Don't worry, sweetheart. Heaven hears everything and angels are already circling ready to protect your baby." Emily's father stayed on the phone. Finally, he joyfully shouted, "All gave birth to a girl. We have a granddaughter." In spite of the late hour, the relatives hurried to the hospital. Even Camille decided to keep up with the company. Emily's mother wanted to cool the old lady's ardor. "Mom, where are you going to go skiing and stay home?" "No, not that. I've waited so long for this day to stay home." When the delegation of relatives appeared in the emergency room, the nurse on duty looked at the unusual team with surprise. "Wait, I'll call the ward now." Not 2 minutes passed as the girl reappeared. "Who is the father of the newborn?" John took a step forward. "Maya. Wait, the doctor will be here in a bit. He wants to talk to you." The girl tried not to look into the eyes of the happily smiling John. The doctor who had invited him into the office also had a strange expression on his face, but the first words of the doctor shocked the man. "It's very hard for me to say this, but the girl was not born quite healthy. She has a severe heart defect, and she needs special care now. We have everything ready at home. The conditions are perfect. You misunderstand me. The baby can't breathe on her own, so we're gonna put her in a ditch. It's a special chamber where she'll be given oxygen. When she's a little stronger in about 2 weeks, the perinatal center, and she'll be operated on. John wasn't quite sure what the doctor was talking about. What surgery? What are you talking about? She's just a little baby. I'll be honest with you, the baby won't survive without surgery. Your wife doesn't know anything yet. It was a difficult labor, and we haven't told her anything yet. So it's up to you to decide. If it's a matter of saving a life, of course I agree. But how could this happen? Why? That's a question no one can answer. The most important thing now is to determine a treatment strategy. Don't despair. Although the threshold is difficult, not everything is lost, but you will have to do several operations. So have courage and patience. Basically, now the future of the baby depends on you and your wife. John left the doctor's office and sank down on the couch without strength. Emily's parents and grandmother looked fearfully at the grief-stricken father. John, my dove, tell me, what's wrong? Camille clutched at the man's arm. Emily's parents also stood with aggrieved faces. What's wrong with Emily? John, don't say anything. No, with the baby. The girl was born with a malformation. With his head down, the man wandered toward the exit. Camille tried to catch up with him. You can't write it like that. They cure such diseases today, and my granddaughter will be cured. John stopped and looked at the old woman with his manly smile. I envy your optimism, Camille, but I don't believe in angels and heavenly powers anymore. You shouldn't have faith. Faith gives you strength. First, John tried to follow the advice of my wife's grandmother. He helped his wife in everything, on whose shoulders all the hardest things fell. After the first operation that little Wendy had when she was only a month and a half old, the girl recovered quickly. As it should be, a healthy baby, in a year she already independently ran and happily made a mess in the apartment. But it is known that trouble comes from there, where no one expects it to come from. Young parents rejoiced at every success of their daughter and tried to diversify her leisure time. They did not refuse the invitation of a colleague at work whose daughter was a few months older than Wendy. John, come as a family. Our girl is 2 years old. We want to celebrate in a fun way. The party was a success. Happy Emily and John watched their daughter play enthusiastically with other children. The consequences of the event manifested themselves after 2 days. The girl began to suffocate, and the mark on the thermometer all the time showed 39. For 2 weeks, the child was saved in intensive care, but a trivial cold left the most severe consequences. Wendy never fully recovered, and every half hour she had to be given oxygen. For the young family, the days were dark. Most of the budget was spent on necessary medications and trips to the best clinics, although relatives helped as much as they could, but the funds were clearly insufficient. And then there is a distinguished professor to whom they almost got to a consultation, said, "The situation is grave. The little girl's heart is like an old woman's. It cannot withstand even minimal loads." Emily pleaded, "What should we do? Help save the girl." The professor philosophically remarked, "Sometimes medicine is powerless. You have a special case, but tears and pleading will not help you here. The only correct solution, in my opinion, will be a repeated operation to install an artificial valve. But it's still a temporary measure. In the long run, we need the help of transplant surgeons." John's alert. "Professor, you mean to say that yes, you have understood me correctly. Your daughter will need a donor heart. But I want to warn you right away that the waiting list is years long. They say shared grief brings people together. But Emily and John worked out against that law. 6 months after the consultation of the famous professor, Wendy had a second operation, but it had almost no positive result. The girl was practically unable to exist without the machine through which she breathed. Therefore, Emily could not take her out even for a walk. For the mother and the sick girl, the world was now confined to the size of a 2-room apartment with a balcony. And down there, A very different life was simmering. But despite her serious illness, Wendy was unrecognizable. She was homeschooled and eagerly awaited the arrival of her teachers. Another of the girl's hobbies was drawing. In her incomplete 8 years, she accurately conveyed all the shades and details of the plot of her work. She was happy to show it to anyone who wanted to see it. One day the teacher, who came to visit them every day, said, "Your girl has a talent. If you don't mind, I will show her drawings to an artist I know who teaches at the Academy of Art." At first, Emily did not pay any attention to the words of the young teacher, but she gave her daughter several works, and soon forgot about it, the load of worldly cares, every day more and more heavily pressed on the woman. One day she confessed to her mother, who visited them daily. The girl nodded at the mask. "Don't think that if a person has a bad heart, his head doesn't work. I understand everything perfectly well." "And what do you understand about what?" "Mom and Dad don't seem to be fighting, but they're no longer happy like they used to be. And I wish they were cheerful again, and we'd all go to the park together for a walk. Do you remember that?" "I do. That's why I paint my pictures, to make a lot of money. I'm going to sell them." Evelyn was struck by the pragmatism of a sick girl. "Who put you up to this?" "Grandma, you're crazy. I saw on TV how a boy with no arms could hold a brush with his lips and paint. I have arms and legs, but they'll sew my heart back on later." So the professor said, "Oh, you're distracting me. I wanted to show you the picture I'm going to give to Mom and Dad." The girl rummaged through the folder with drawings, and after a second pulled out a colorful drawing. Wendy and her parents could be easily recognized in the 3 smiling people. The girl corrected the mask and asked with undisguised pleasure, "Really? Great. Just great. Are you such a good girl?" Tears came to her eyes. And not to upset her granddaughter, Evelyn left the balcony. "I'm gonna go help your mom, and you draw." The drawing with a positive subject remained on the balcony. Apparently, the young artist forgot to hide it in her folder. In the evening, John, as usual, showed up when his wife and daughter were already asleep. He decided to go out on the balcony to get some fresh air, and so noticed his daughter's drawing. "What is it?" "It's Wendy. She wanted to give us a present for our wedding anniversary, but while talking to her grandmother, she forgot to put her drawing away." John didn't notice his wife coming over, despite her heart condition. "Our Wendy is drawing and generally trying to live the life of a normal child, and she is succeeding. It's a shame you don't see it." Emily disappeared into the bedroom. John, for a long time in the moonlight, looked at the drawing, in which everything was filled with special meaning. Emily did not wait for any words from her husband. She thought that something would awaken in him that would make him return to the John she knew. But he went to bed silently, also silently left for work in the morning. Emily knew from his phone conversations that her husband was up for a promotion and justified his constant delays with that. The fact that he was promoted Emily, of course, pleased. After all, it is an addition to the salary, and maybe they will be able to buy Wendy something more expensive, which will help her better than domestic drugs. But the next day, something happened that made Emily forget her worries. Toward lunchtime, the doorbell rang. Yes, so insistently that even Wendy lifted her head from her drawing. Emily wiped her hands and went to open it. Strange. Who could it be? On the doorstep stood the same teacher who had admired Wendy's drawings and had even taken some to show someone. With her was a man in his 60s, 65. "Hello, Emily. Forgive me for dropping by unannounced. I'd like you to meet him. This is the artist, the teacher from the Academy of Art, Robert." Emily thought she'd heard that name before on TV when the man was being honored with an award. "Hello. Come in, please." The man immediately sat down next to Wendy. They talked about something and his eyebrows went up every now and then. Then he asked Wendy, "Do you have any of your favorite drawings?" The girl smiled. "Of course, I even have them in a separate folder." The girl looked at Emily, and she quickly pulled out the folder with the drawings. "Maybe some tea." Robert smiled. "You know, I wouldn't say no to that. Half an hour later, they sat down at the set table. Wendy sat on the kitchen sofa eagerly, catching every word the artist said. "You see, Emily, will you allow me to call you that? Yes, of course, your girl has talent, but I think you realize that yourself. I feel like a snail in a shell. I imagine my sweet grandmother would be telling me off right now for saying that. I wish she were here. I miss her a lot too. Mom was a great optimist. I only saw her cry once. It was when my father died. So always with a smile and a push. We don't so much want to be like Grandma, but we can't. Especially lately. I'm always moping around, just hanging in there for Wendy. Oh, John, I mean, he used to support you through everything. Or has that changed?" Emily didn't want to dump her problems on her mother's head, but she felt a desperate need to share them with someone. "I don't know. Maybe it's just a figment of my sick imagination. But John has changed a lot, especially in the last year. He's become irritable, even rude to me. He won't even go into Wendy's room. You should talk to him. I've tried, but he's avoiding direct conversation. I get the impression he's afraid of me and Wendy and everything in this house. You know what, Mom? My husband's been coming home closer to midnight, so I'm starting to think he's got another woman. If he leaves me and my daughter, I don't know how we're gonna live. Don't you dare even think about that. Thank God you're not alone. Your father and I are always there for you, and John is a very responsible man. I'm sure he wouldn't do something as mean as this. Oh, Mom, I'm not so sure about that. He's changed." Suddenly, Emily thought of the teacher who had praised Wendy's talent. "I've bored you to tears, but there's good news. Vanessa, the teacher took some drawings to show the artist. Of course, I don't believe in all the Cinderella stories, but who knows?" Evelyn said thoughtfully, "I told you 100 times my granddaughter gems. It takes such a sick child to draw like that. Would you hire a tutor or art teacher for her?" "Mom, I'd love to, but with what money? We're barely making ends meet as it is. Medicines are so expensive, and we have the only breadwinner, and he's always in a bad mood. And you don't need anything. I don't think lessons like this will cost much. My father and I will help. Maybe our Wendy will become a famous artist. Where is she, by the way?" Emily nodded in the direction of the balcony, where she was organizing a plain air painting in the nature. Although you can hardly call nature a small oasis of green under our balcony. The girl was passionately drawing with her tongue sticking out. The mask of the device did not interfere with the creative process, and the young artist deftly corrected it every time she changed her body position. Evelyn leaned over to examine her granddaughter's work. "Well done, my good girl. Grandma, I didn't realize you were here." The mask slipped traitorously from her face, and the girl began to gulp for air with her mouth. Evelyn quickly fixed the device. "You mustn't make any sudden movements, and you mustn't even get excited. Grandmother, you don't have to be afraid for me. I'm used to it. A lady came to visit us and said that she would soon give me a device so that I could go out with it." Emily confirmed it from afar. "It slipped my mind. Wendy was sponsored by a foundation called Sunshine. They've actually promised to help with the purchase of a new machine. But it's gonna take a while to raise enough money. But thank you for visiting, bringing gifts." Wendy was unhappily interrupted by her mother. "Mom, you've been talking to Grandma for almost an hour. Now it's my turn." Emily conceded to her daughter. "All right, folks. I'll shut up and won't bother you. I'd better go to the kitchen and make something tastier." Taking advantage of his mother's absence, Wendy called his grandmother. "And I have something to show you. Mom and Dad's anniversary is coming up." Evelyn asked in surprise. "How do you know, Grandma? Do you think I'm so little? I even walk around the apartment alone sometimes without that nasty thing." Talent is a rare thing these days. That's why you have to work hard to find it. I have a son. He is a businessman, and he helps children and me at the same time. From time to time, he organizes children's exhibitions. I think you've heard of them. Well, I think that your daughter's work is worthy of such an exhibition, worthy of recognition." Emily listened and could not believe her ears. She thought her daughter was just good at drawing. It's not that much of a talent. And it turns out, I don't even know. You can see that. Wendy, she's not exactly healthy. That's no reason for her to be recognized. Besides, it's to your advantage. The more people know about Wendy, the more likely someone will be able to help her. And I'd like to provide Wendy with a personal art teacher. You will determine the times when you are comfortable having a stranger in the house. The young artist's first solo exhibition was at the Children's Art House. On Family Day, it's a joyous occasion. Wendy met on the rise because a few days before she was given a new machine. Therefore, the master of drawing could attend the presentation herself. Emily tried not to let her daughter notice how bad she felt. Emily. As soon as it was known that the exhibition was definitely going to happen, they were announced the date and time. Emily tried to tell her husband about it. True, it did not work on the first day. He came already at 0 o'clock. So Emily got up early to prepare breakfast for John early, and at breakfast to tell him everything. He entered the kitchen, looked at the pancakes and scrambled eggs. Then he looked at Emily and sighed faintly and sat down at the table. John, do you want coffee or tea? Coffee. She placed the mug in front of him. John, I need to talk to you. Emily, I've got a lot on my mind right now. And I want to eat breakfast so I can concentrate. She could see that her husband was having trouble holding back, but she wasn't about to back down. It's nice when you're never here. I need to talk. I need to work things out. After all, you can. Emily stepped back to the window and turned away from him. John looked at her carefully for the first time in a long time. The jeans she'd had on since before she was pregnant. They were so weathered that they seemed purposely frayed. Some kind of uniform t-shirt. Emily appeared very thin in it, though she did seem to have lost a lot of weight. Hair in bunches. He'd always hated the bun. But she used to laugh and say, "Do you think I should sweep up dust with my hair?" Yes, Emily has changed a lot. If that's the case, you can see it on a young woman. What to say about him and his pants? It's a year old too. Of course, he has others. But it's still a long time since he buys what he wants. Yes, he doesn't buy anything at all, doesn't make anything of what he wants. All he does is work and bring in money. Sometimes he has the feeling that he comes home after a paycheck, throws all the money into a big cauldron that burns with hellfire, and immediately realizes it is possible to turn around and go back to work, because there is no more money. Lately, John has been realizing that he's tired of it all. He doesn't want to live like this anymore. Yes, Emily loves him, and Wendy is not to blame. But he's human too. He hasn't done anything wrong in front of God. He shouldn't have to carry all this. He's not even 40 yet, and he feels like he's well into his 60s, so the life he hasn't lived is over. There's nothing ahead of him. I mean, it's the same as it is now. Emily turns around, and John sees the determination in her eyes. Emily, don't start. We'll talk. We'll talk about everything. Give me a few days to get my thoughts together. She suddenly agreed. All right. Aha. Let's do it Friday. We can't drag this out any longer. We have a show on Sunday. She wanted to say exhibition, but John had already left. Emily grinned sadly. For more than a year now, he didn't kiss her when he came, didn't kiss her when he left. At first she cried resentful, but then she accepted nothing. She and her mom bought a beautiful Wendy dress for Friday. After all, it's the first important event in her life. John didn't come home on Friday. He didn't show up until Saturday. But it was already night, and waking him up in the morning to go to the exhibition didn't work. Emily could clearly smell the booze. It was so strange. John didn't like to drink at all. Anyway, they were already running late, so they left him to it. They left for the trade show. Evelyn, really mumbling. What kind of father is that? Such an event not to go to the child. Mom, I can't even tell him about this event because John is never home. Evelyn choked with indignation. But that's okay. She will talk to John again. Emily has fallen out of love. It happens. But the baby had nothing to do with it. The show was a real success. So many words were said for Wendy that the girl got excited and even had to take medication. But the grandmother and mother saw it coming, so it was without consequences. And then, at the very end of the party, Robert brought a man to them. "Lovely ladies, please love and applaud. This is my son, Kevin. He's the man who organized this party." Emily smiled involuntarily. Robert spoke of his son with ill-concealed pride. "Good evening. I am very glad that my father was not mistaken again. Creative people light up very quickly. But tonight I'm shocked even though my dad says I can't feel like artists." Emily had time to look at the man while they were having a quite secular dialogue, about 40 years old, maybe a little more. Very personable, austere, but not until he started smiling. His smile was mischievous, boyish, and at that moment it was clear that no, he was 40 and could not be. "I actually approached you for 2 reasons, or rather, 2 things. The first, Emily, several people would like to buy your daughter's drawings since she is a minor. Our man will help you decide on the price. He handles auction sales. And secondly, I would like to invite you all to a restaurant to celebrate such a success, but apparently it will not be possible." He looked pityingly at Wendy, who was terribly tired, pale, and thoughtful. "Yes, unfortunately. No way. Wendy should have rested a long time ago." But then Evelyn intervened. "Emily, I think that such an event should be celebrated on this day. You could invite Kevin and Jenna to visit." She turned to the men. "You just can't imagine how she cooks. I always told her she should go to work in a restaurant instead of a boring accounting department." Emily smiled modestly. She was uncomfortable with her mom's words. But now some words from her were required. "Okay, let's do Tuesday. It's a free day, Wendy, no classes." Robert smiled contentedly. "Oh, I'm so pleased. If only who knew. I hate these restaurants. I've had them all my life, and I'm always mixing up forks." That's his confession. Emily was immediately relieved. A second before his words, she was feverishly thinking about how to set and prepare everything so as not to fall into the mud. It turned out that great people could be ordinary, too. They agreed on a time. Kevin offered them a ride. Evelyn immediately said she had somewhere else to be, so Emily and Wendy had to go alone. They talked mostly about the exhibition at home. Kevin smiled. "So I'll see you the day after tomorrow. Does that sound right?" "Good. By then, I think we'll have a buyer in mind." They said a warm farewell, and Wendy could barely move her legs. "I didn't call it." Emily immediately put her to bed. She heard John splashing in the bathtub. "Very good. Now they're going to talk." Well, he's not callous enough not to be happy about his daughter's success. About 20 minutes later, the bathroom door opened. John appeared in the kitchen outside the house. He didn't even ask where they were. It was like a kid with oxygen masks on his face, walking around free and clear all the time. "Yeah, we're home. It's really good that you're home too. Otherwise, lately we only know about my husband having Wendy's daddy from memory." He turned to her abruptly. "And I don't understand what's wrong. I pass you like an ox, and I can't even afford anything. All the money goes into the abyss. You must have forgotten that there is another life, the life that normal people live. They go to the movies, buy themselves expensive things. Their homes don't smell like medicine. They work to live a life of pleasure. My life is weird. I'm 30-something. I'm young. I want to live." Emily stood silent and looked at her husband in horror. It can't be. It wasn't him, because her John couldn't say that. I mean, she knew him well. He was always worried about them. He loves them. "John, I don't know what you're talking about. Wendy, our daughter, was born this way." He turned sharply toward her. "No, not us, you. You're the one who gave birth to a sick child. You're torturing yourself. You're torturing the baby. And you've decided that I don't want my life either. But I'm wrong. You're the only one in this whole situation. Wendy's sick, and I'm Pasha, seeing no light, seeing no money, day and night. And you're just being there for her. You work, you spend mine, but sometimes you give your daughter medicine. John, what are you talking about? Emily took a few steps and literally fell into a chair. That I'm telling the truth. And I don't understand why I have to suffer. Basically, it's not life. It's just existence. I'm sick of it. Do you understand? Do you or don't you? Emily said in a surprisingly calm voice. And what do you propose to change? What do you need to do to find a way out of this situation? You do realize that we can't change anything yet. That's right. But I can. Why should everyone suffer? If just one person can live a normal life. I even shook my head to try to understand what my husband was saying. John, I don't understand you. He's sitting next to me at the table. Emily, I'm leaving. I don't care what you think of me, but I don't want to live like this anymore. Emily felt the ground shake under her feet. You're leaving. But it's death to Wendy. You know the medication they're giving her barely works. We have to buy everything. What are we gonna do without you? Emily, don't try to make me feel sorry for you. I'm not. I'm trying to understand if you're knowingly going through with this, knowing exactly what leaving you means to your daughter. John stood up silently and walked out into the hallway. Emily followed him. Tears came in torrents. John, please think about it. Think what will happen to us. But he threw on his jacket, turned to her. When you calm down, pack my things and don't try to bother me. It won't make a difference anyway. He closed the door behind him, and Emily slid quietly down the wall. What to do now? How to live? About 10 minutes later, she heard her daughter calling her. Emily rushed to her. Wendy was pale, but it was nothing Emily did not notice. Mommy, can I draw? Emily smiled. You draw all the time. Don't you get tired? No, Mommy, why do I like you so much? I even feel better about myself. Emily restrained herself as much as she could so that her daughter would not guess anything. She didn't need that kind of excitement. That evening, when Wendy was already asleep, Emily sat down in the kitchen to assess what they had of their medications and what they would have to buy soon. Then I counted the money, but they'll last a couple months if nothing goes up in price. What then? She clearly realized that if she didn't think of anything in those 2 months, everything would come to an end. It wasn't until the next day that she remembered they had company. Having to tear a little more from the budget was all for Wendy. Emily did everything automatically. She smiled machine-like at her daughter. She cooked, talked to her, and her mind kept racing with the thought, what to do. The guests arrived on time. Her mom had called to say her father was sick, and not to risk Wendy, she wouldn't be coming. She didn't want to catch a cold. I'm sorry, daughter. I'll manage. And then I'll be on my own. All right, Mom. I'll manage. Robert and his son showed up 1 minute later. Emily smiled, invited him into the room. Robert immediately dropped out. What smells? No, you tell me. How can you trade those smells for restaurant smells? Kevin smiled. Dad had always been a stickler for home-cooked meals and family gatherings at home. Mom never could get him used to the social rounds. Why didn't you bring your mom along? Emily looked at Kevin. She died 10 years ago. Dad barely made it out. Loved her dearly. Mom was an opera singer and sang until she died. Romantic nature. She loved her very much. Glitter, glamour. He was quiet for a while. And Dad, I'm so sorry. Emily was so upset. Who'd pulled her tongue? It's okay. We feel better now. Jenna's voice came from the room. He was talking to Wendy. Emily made a gesture toward the room. Come in, please. When they entered, Robert was standing by Wendy's desk, looking at something and frowning a low brow. He threw a quick glance at Emily. Then said, Kevin, come here. Now the two men were looking at the drawing, and both were silent. Emily smiled. What did you see there? You know. By the way, I wanted to look at it too, but Wendy stopped her. Mommy, it's not finished yet. Wendy quickly hid the drawing. Emily, of course, was very surprised, but did not argue. Later, she would ask her daughter, since when was she not allowed to look at it? Drawings that are not quite finished yet. While sitting at the table and listening to Robert loudly admiring each dish, Emily seemed to relax a little. Kevin pushed his plate away. "Well, can we talk business now?" "Emily, here's a card that will receive funds from the sale of drawings of Wendy's paintings. There's already a few on there. I'd like your permission to take some to Italy. There's the annual Young Talent Show in a week. The prize is very impressive, but participation requires your written consent and a small photo shoot of Wendy." Emily shrugged. "Sure, why not?" Robert asked Emily, "Tell me, how do you live? Do you have a foundation, or do you have your own foundation?" "I recently took the Sunny Foundation under my wing. They bought us a portable machine. We couldn't afford it on our own. Pardon me for the indiscreet question about medicine. We all realize that we don't have much money. My husband made a good living, but his salary was barely enough." "I'm sorry, why was he earning?" "He lost his job." Emily smiled sadly. Only now she realized that she was all alone with her problems. "No, he left us just yesterday. She said she couldn't work for me and a sick child for the rest of her life." Kevin choked on his tea. Robert clenched his fists. "Don't you worry, Emily. Everything in life is for the best." She smiled weakly. John walked to the park and sat down on a bench. Not half an hour later, a woman came and sat next to him. "So, did you talk?" "It was fine. What do you think?" Jenna placed her hand affectionately on his shoulder. "John, relax. All the bad stuff is behind you. There's nothing but positivity ahead. In a month, you and I are going to the sea. It'll be a great reward for your suffering. You'll come back with renewed vigor. Let's get to work. The promotion is yours for sure. You realize you've been living without oxygen." "I do. Jenna, let's make a bigger deal. Just don't bring them up." "Sure. What do you say? So, shall we go home? I ordered dinner from the restaurant. I also bought a nice wine. I'm taking the day off tomorrow, so we have all night." John smiled. He would try to put out of his mind everything that prevented him from having a good life. It was the kind of life he had dreamed of, or rather started to dream of when he started to get closer to Jenna. It had all happened suddenly. He hadn't even thought about it. Cheating on Emily, especially not with Jenna, whom he had disliked since the very first day he met her. To be honest, he hadn't seen her in a long time. Probably since Emily was pregnant. I hadn't seen her, and I'd never been interested. What difference does it make how his wife's ex-girlfriend lives? That day, his car failed to start once again. And of course, not at home, but at work. The time is such that public transportation does not run, and a cab is very expensive, almost to the other side of the city. He decided to walk a few stops closer to the center. There, the minibuses were definitely very thirsty. John saw a store ahead of him and turned there to buy some water. At the door, he was almost knocked down by some lady. "I beg your pardon." And the lady suddenly said, "John, are you or is it?" He looked up in surprise. In front of him stood Jenna, groomed with makeup, perfumed with expensive perfume. Not Jenna recognized. "What are you doing here at this hour?" "Yeah, my car broke down. I'm walking to the center, and I'm driving. You can see my head standing there." He turned around and saw a pretty fresh BMW in bright blue. "It's a nice machine." Jenna laughed. "That's not what I mean. I mean, I can give you a ride. Go ahead, buy what you need and get out. I'll wait for the car." John went to the counter. It was kind of a mixed feeling. On the one hand, I didn't want to see Jenna. On the other hand, she's so beautiful, so fashionable, so free. It was like a breath of fresh air. He sat down in the car, which smelled of new leather, expensive perfume, something else so forgottenly expensive. Jenna smiled. "Did you like it?" She laughed. "You make it sound like you're starving yourself. You had a pretty good job, as I recall. But the job hasn't gone anywhere. Everything else is gone. I mean, Wendy's sick. All the money, absolutely everything, goes to her treatment. Emily doesn't work, so we can't use my paycheck for anything extra. If you knew how sick I am of this, he said, and was afraid of his own words. He had never let himself do that before. Jenna looked at him thoughtfully. Listen, let's take the stress out of retirement. I just finished my reports at work. I'm the boss, but I'm tired as a dog. John wasn't much of a drinker, but I just didn't want to go home so badly. So he said, let's go back to my place. I have everything in my bar that the soul desires. The man, to be honest, did not expect such a turn. I thought they'd sit somewhere neutral, and now it's her house. He wasn't a little boy and understood perfectly well how such meetings ended. He was suddenly overcome with a fever. He pictured Jenna on the regional sheets with a glass of champagne in her hands. In a hoarse voice, he replied, "Give it to you." That evening, or rather night, turned everything upside down in John's head. Jenna very unobtrusively made him realize that his self-sacrifice was just dope. Well, I mean, come on. What's your fault? You don't have any genetic abnormalities. There's no one in your family with this disease. Why do you have to suffer your whole life? Don't you think it's a little unfair? Are you earning money? You could have a very good life. I'm sorry, it's none of my business. Let's have a drink. They had another drink, and then Jenna put on some beautiful music and asked him to dance. It had been so long since he danced. It had been so long since he'd been in such a romantic setting. He left Jenna, and in the morning he told himself it wouldn't happen again. He went home quietly. Immediately caught, though barely noticeable, but the smell of medicine, all so gray, dull, went to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator. Everything is so ordinary. Even to take and just eat something tasty will not work, because such impractical food they just do not have. Everyone's on a very tight budget. Jenna called him a week later. He didn't know how she got his number, but he was glad. "John, hi. I don't know how you're gonna take my offer. Anyway, it's my birthday tomorrow. It's a non-circular date, so no celebration. I've been thinking about who I'd like to sit with. And you know, I've decided that you're the only person I want to see at my house." Was he pleased? He sure did. He'd long since forgotten that Jenna was unpleasant, that Jenna exuded anger and jealousy. What was Jenna like now, anyway? What's his Emily like? Heaven and earth. And even if John were to go to pieces, he would change absolutely nothing. I mean, not at all. Jenna, I'd love to, John, but if you're talking about presents, please don't even think about it. I understand. In fact, I think we need to find a way out of this situation. Well, there has to be. They always say there's only one way out of one situation. And you don't have one. Well, I'll see you tomorrow. What time would be best for you? If you can get an hour early so I can be there at 6 o'clock, I can do that. John clenched his eyes. What is he doing? Then asked Jenna decisively, "Jenna, can you at least tell me what kind of flowers you like?" She laughed. "I like roses, like all women do." John almost blurted out that, for example, his Emily adores only chrysanthemums. All then yes, tomorrow from that birthday. John's mind clicked. He didn't want to go home. He didn't want to live like that anymore. He wanted to live a good life, the way a professional of his caliber deserves. It took him a long time to come to this decision. Even though Jenna had urged him to move almost immediately, maybe he still would have hesitated. But then Emily started talking to him. How could she tell him to do all the posts? And when she caught him, he just didn't bother to move that unpleasant conversation again. What was the point of putting up with it? He told her everything that was on his mind. Everything was almost ruined by that drawing, the one he had once found on the balcony, and something stirred in his soul. It made him want to cry. I went to bed upset. In the morning, I decided I had to end things with Jenna. She'd sent him a list of hot tours in the morning. He hasn't been to the seaside in 1,000 years. It's so tempting. The vacation at work was no problem. John, Of course you should go. Don't we get it? You haven't been on vacation in 5 years. Don't worry. We'll support your department. So you'll be back. You'll be fine. How's yours? His boss looked at him sympathetically. What could he tell him about leaving them? Well, of course he couldn't. He shrugged, nothing new. All right, go on. I won't keep you too long. Take a vacation from the hubris, realizing that after the vacation, you will be waiting for a completely different position. It's a good thing you're on vacation. With renewed vigor, he started. He recounted the conversation to Jenna, leaving out the phrase about his family. Jenna rubbed his hands together. But here's life getting better. First, we're gonna have to get you a decent car. Your car's been in the scrap heap for a long time. Then we can expand our place. John lay on the couch and believed that everything would be just like that. What else could it be? Now he's a free man. The vacation at the sea was unforgettable. John never even once had the urge to call to find out how Wendy or Emily were doing, and Jenna never left a minute to spare. Take him on a field trip, to his room, to the beach. He's tanned, and he's looking good. Jenna would lie beside him at night and say, you're so handsome, strong, you're the best. And he believed it was true. He went to work with pleasure. First of all, he had a good rest. Secondly, he realized that very soon he would become not the head of the department, but the head of the whole division. And this is quite different. Even cars will be allocated to him. And not just any car, but a good one. His company has all the cars. Fire greeted the guard, immediately went to the office to the boss to hand souvenirs from the sea. Good morning, David. The boss slowly turned from the window. Hello, John. How was your vacation? Very well. I brought you a souvenir. The warden looked at John strangely. He didn't even feel comfortable under that look. I brought my daughter a souvenir too. John stopped smiling. What did he want? Sooner or later everyone was going to find out, and he was mentally preparing for it. What did his daughter have to do with it? What did she have to do with it? Oh, John, I've been working with people for so many years, and I never thought you'd be capable of something like this. John chuckled. But you can't judge anything because you don't know anything. I'm sorry. I have to go to work. The supervisor gave him an attentive look and shook his head. Clearly, there was a woman involved. He had talked to Emily several times, and he liked her. A beautiful, quiet woman, strong in spirit. And John was just furious. Who gave them the right to meddle in his private life? Who? What did they even know about his life? He slumped into his chair. Only a glass partition separated him, as head of the department, from the rest of the employees. Several times he took a break from his papers and realized that his colleagues were looking at him and obviously talking about him. So everyone here knew about him. But the most unpleasant thing that day was not the slanted glances, not the conversation with the boss. When he came to the cafe on the first floor to have lunch, people parted to let him to the cash register. He grinned. Wow, respect. They knowed he's going to be the boss soon. He put everything he had chosen on the tray, paid, and headed for his favorite table by the window. There were only 2 women from the neighboring department sitting on one side of the table. Enjoy your meal. He set down his tray and sat down. The women silently took their trays and moved to another table. John poured himself a fury. The first thing he would do when he became the boss would be to fire these 2 chickens who stuck their noses where they didn't belong. And a week later, something happened that John certainly didn't expect. A general meeting was called throughout the office. John came that day in a suit with a white shirt. He was well aware that today was the day he would be assigned to his new position. Jenna looked him over meticulously at home and was pleased. You look great. I like it a lot. After lunch, all the people stretched out to the hall. John went too. He sat in the front row where the other department heads sat. For the last time now, he would always sit at the table on the stage. His supervisor, David, lowered himself down next to him. He listened silently to everything that was being broadcast from the stage. Then John heard something. He jumped up, but quickly sat down by his supervisor. Some broad was appointed. After a second, he headed for the exit in rapid strides. An hour later, when everyone was back, including David, John headed for his office. "Can you explain to me what that was about? You said I was going to be the boss." The chief looked at him and answered calmly, "We all consulted and decided that such a serious post could not be headed by a man without principles. The man is a traitor." "Jesus, what the hell are you talking about? 1,000 people get divorced. 1,000 people leave their families. Maybe. But in this situation, what do you know about the situation? Have you lived in that kind of hell? You haven't. It's not for you to judge." The warden took off his glasses, rubbed his nose. "How do you know from others? I have a son with cerebral palsy, and his mom wanted an easy life just like you. No problems. But it's okay, we're doing fine. And by your logic, I should have put him in a boarding school immediately. In that case, I should probably quit. He's already regretting what he said. What if David says yes, and then what does he do? You know, that's not a bad idea. Anyway, you won't get any more support from me." In the evening, Janet was long gone from work. John didn't know why he was so worried, did he? Well, he quit. That's fine. There's always a job for a professional like him. He'll find one tomorrow. Jenna showed up at 0:00 with a whiff of champagne. What are you doing up? Where have you been?" Jenna gave him a surprised look. "What's with the tone?" "Normal tone. I was wondering where my woman was. Actually, it's gonna be morning soon. But first of all, I'm not two, I'm a woman. Serfdom was abolished a long time ago. And secondly, what kind of snobbery is this? I'm not going to answer to you for every move I make. We're adults, we have friends. We have girlfriends." John realized it was time to slow down. "But you could have called." "I could have, but I forgot." John, gritting his teeth, she forgot. He called 100 times. First she hung up on him. Then she just turned the phone off. "I have news." Jenna raised her hands. "John, all tomorrow. I'm insanely tired." He silently followed her into the bedroom, but Jenna collapsed so there was no room for him on the bed. He had to go back to the living room and make himself comfortable on the short couch. He lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, thinking. He was hired. True, the salary was not so decent. Jenna was terribly unhappy. Emily should have her parental rights revoked so she doesn't run around complaining. What makes you think it's her? Who else? Even if it wasn't her, it was her. I told you, they're just poisoning your life. By the way, you filed the divorce papers. And this guy, cute little wedding dress review. About 3 years later, Jenna was fired for a big shortfall. The whole debt was pinned on her. And John suddenly realized he was right back where he'd left off. Only there was a kid, and here was Jenna. Just like that, all the money was going into the abyss. Jenna was paying off the debt so she wouldn't go to jail, and John was working. Jenna couldn't because less than the principal. She wasn't okay with it. Principal positions are snapped up very quickly. One evening on the way home, John turned down a familiar street, stopped under the windows, stood looking at the glowing squares. It was so disgusting and sweet. Wanted to go up and say what a fool he was to be forgiven. I wanted to see his daughter's drawings. "John, are you there?" He jerked. Next to the car was the grandmother of their first-floor neighbor. "Hello. Yes, I am. Haven't seen you in a while. You're just standing there for nothing. They sold your apartment and went somewhere very far away. You have to take an airplane. It's a different country." "How did they leave?" "Why? Jenna's not allowed. But they didn't tell me that. They went away to live, I think. Oh, to Italy." He didn't understand anything. It's not like Grandma was confused. She's always been known to be very clever. And if that's true, then it's a load of crap. The doctor said a flight. Any flight. Could be Wendy's last. There's too much chance the valve could fail. Emily couldn't have volunteered for this, unless she also decided to make her life easier. No, Emily was definitely not capable of that. He pulled out of the yard, thinking about calling Emily's mother, but then he decided he'd better not. Now he could live his life in peace, but life wasn't going well. Things got a little out of hand. Jenna got a job as a bookkeeper at some housing and utilities department, and she made pennies. The firm where John worked was bought out and recruited young workers. He was offered to stay on the dole or quit. Now he had to scrape by on odd jobs, so he made a few. The car was the only thing he had when he was on the upswing. He and Jenna managed to buy a car. Jenna sold hers as soon as she got into debt. Today he came back from another coven. There was a desire to drink beer and sleep, but Jenna had other plans for him. Why are you turning yourself in? What's the big deal? I'm tired. Do you watch the news? There's an exhibition of some artist in our town starting today. She came from abroad. They say she's very talented. But that's not what I'm talking about. Today the women were saying that the city is flooded with foreigners. Do you have any idea how much cab drivers make these days? John looked longingly at the 2 bottles of beer. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. It's kind of a holiday for you and me today. A holiday? What kind of holiday? But I left you 10 years ago. But I wouldn't call it a celebration. Personally, I've had nothing but bad luck since you left. He was starting to get annoyed by the setbacks. So it's okay that you're the one who broke up my family. Who needs you? Should I have lured you in with a finger? You didn't have to. You dropped everything and came running. Not even a sick child stopped him. What a man. John jumped up, fists clenched. Are you gonna hit me? Go ahead. He stood there without moving. But you can't even do that. You can't do anything. John walked silently to the door. Any more, and he'd hit her. It was all her fault, just her. It's just that she got caught up in the time when he doubted. Another person would have backed it up. It was all her and only her. John stopped for a smoke not far from the mall. Nearby on the wall he saw a large poster. Wow, Nick was a young talent. The exhibition was at the House of Culture. I wonder what she's doing here. Well, not a city, of course, not the latest, but not Moscow either. Why did she come here? Other cab drivers. He found out that there are indeed a lot of foreigners in the city. They came to buy paintings that hadn't been sold for a long time because of this exhibition. The foreigners paid well. They left tips. I mean, it makes sense to go there. It's kind of closed to everyone. I'm eating now. I'll go too, even though I made a lot of money today. A mustachioed cab driver got into a wrecked Zhiguli and drove off. John pulled out of the parking lot. It's almost an hour to 7 o'clock. So he'll make it 10 times that time there's no work in the city. Who was on his way home from work and who was going for a walk? Back home near the House of Culture stood a lot of cars, all expensive, beautiful cabs stretched along the edge of the parking lot. One car attracted his attention, a big white Jeep. John did not even immediately realize what brand it was. Got out of the car, walked the machine around in a circle. Yeah, not bad. I wonder how much it cost. He stood for a while longer, then got into his car. How come he fell asleep? John never realized. I guess the fatigue had taken its toll. Plus, the sun was warming up. Caught the phone ringing. John, why aren't you answering the phone? It's the 3rd time I've called. I didn't hear you. I'm not yelling. What are you doing? Where are you? Is there a voice behind you? John put the phone away, and you're going to hang up. No, you imagined it. I just didn't say anything for a long time. Okay, well, then I thought you weren't working. Yes, I am. I am. Anyway, when you go home, get some sour cream and herring. John, I was wondering where he got the money for that. The coven had already been shoveled out, but he bit his tongue in time. He was, like, working, not sleeping. You understand me? He didn't answer. He looked out of the car window into the street. A woman was walking from the House of Culture. He didn't pay attention to her at first, but then he froze. It was Emily. There was no doubt about it. She was so beautiful, so fashionable, that he fell out of reality a little. It was as if she hadn't even been 10 years old, although she looked even better now than when he'd left her. "John, can you hear me?" "Hello. What's the connection?" "What for?" "Just paying money." The phone fell on the seat, and John jumped out of the car. Emily, the woman, who was already walking too slowly, as if she was waiting for someone, stopped, looked at him, and her eyes opened in surprise. "John, yes, Emily, it's me. What's not to recognize? You look beautiful." Emily's eyes turned cold. "Yeah, well, I didn't recognize you right away." "Oh, thank you." I know. That's how confused he was. I thought she'd blossom at his compliment. "What's up, Emily?" "I'm good. Thank you." Like Wendy. Now he's done something really stupid. I mean, why ask? It's obvious that Wendy's gone. No doctor's ever given her that much, so why would he even bring up his daughter? On the other hand, she's his daughter. There's nothing wrong with Wendy either. He was surprised, and apparently he made it too obvious. But did a young and girlish voice speak from somewhere off to the side? "You won't believe it, Daddy. Despite your best efforts, she didn't die." John turned sharply. A young girl stood beside him. Yes, he recognized her immediately. It was his daughter, Wendy. Behind her stood a man a little older than John himself, and he was looking at him with an unkind look. "Why did you do that, Wendy?" "I meant you no harm." The girl laughed. "No, you didn't. You didn't mean to hurt us or me when you left me without money, knowing how much the medicine cost. You knew I was dead without it. Mom hid everything, and I heard what you told her before you left. But you don't look like your life is any better without us, do you?" He didn't want to. "Do you know what we've all been through? When we were looking for a heart, we found one. But it was only a few hours on an airplane in another country. My heart stopped. Do you have any idea what Mom went through while you were on vacation from us? If it wasn't for Daddy Kevin, we wouldn't be talking to you right now. He's the only reason I'm alive, is because of him and Grandpa. I was able to fly back to my hometown for my own exhibition." John stood there in silence. Then he asked, "So Nick's young artist, is that you? Is that what you missed?" "Yes, Daddy. I wish you had money now. And the life you want." "I mean, I wanted it." "No, you wouldn't. You're just not capable of doing things like Daddy, Kevin. You know, he almost went to jail because he forced the pilots of a private plane to land near the hospital grounds. Otherwise, I wouldn't have survived. Would you have?" "No, Daddy, you couldn't have done anything because you'd rather walk away from difficulties and problems than deal with them." The man put his hand on Wendy's shoulder. "That's enough. Calm down." The daughter and the man walked towards the big white car. Emily looked at it thoughtfully. "But I won't ask you how you live." "I can see that. I guess this is goodbye, John." He was just about to say something when he heard Jenna screaming. "John, wait, don't go." Oh my God, she was just home. Maybe she wasn't calling from home. Jenna ran up, out of breath, shoved John's bag. "Oh, at least he'll drive me home. I'm so tired." Emily, who was already walking to the car, stopped abruptly. She turned slowly and stared at John's wife. Jenna, the woman, also turned to her for a while, looked perplexed, and then, apparently recognizing Emily, left her with an appraising look and froze. "So that's who encouraged my husband to live a good life." Emily smiled. "Jenna, how many golden ones have you wished for?" "I think you only needed John to bite me harder. I had no idea it was you. You look like you're on a roll." "Oh well, it won't last long. You know how people fall from heights. No mistake. You buried your daughter. What kind of a bitch are you, Jenna?" "No, my daughter is alive and well. And as you can see, quite successfully." Jenna took a quick glance at the poster and wrinkled her nose like a toothache. "You're still something, but you're wearing expensive clothes for your daughter's account." "So what? So you've never had happiness, and you'll never have a simple family life. Bam! Happiness. Jenna looked at her triumphantly. Kevin got out of the car again. Emily, for a long time. You know our son is going to be very unhappy about the long absence, maybe even throwing toys. Emily looked at Kevin with loving eyes. Yeah, you're right. Let's go turn to Jenna and John. Well, goodbye. Advice, yes, love. They walked to the car. John followed Emily. Kevin turned around. Not good. Looked at him and shook his head negatively. The car turned out and out of the parking lot. They stared after her. Suddenly, Jenna's face twisted with anger. Emily, it's okay. You're crying at me, John. You should sue your daughter for child support. She's got so much money, and you're struggling. I know people. We'll get you disability, and she'll pay like a sweetheart. He turned to Jenna. If you don't want to be disabled now, you better shut up. What's that? What are you gonna do? Loser? You've got yourself in a pickle. John hit a woman for the first time in his life. Not hard, just slapped her on the mouth and walked to the car. Jenna lit up the whole street with power. Help, 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 finding no support because there was simply no one around. She threw herself after him. John, stop. Don't you want to have a good life? But think how much money we can get from her without her noticing. Jenna jumped into the car at the last moment, and John sped off. His wife said something, but he didn't listen. There were no thoughts in his head. A big white car parked in front of a beautiful house. Well, here we are. Tired, Wendy. The girl looked gratefully at Kevin. No, Daddy, Kevin, it's okay. Let's go already. I can imagine Sebastian torturing Grandpa. They went in, but the house was quiet. That's odd. Actually, they thought Grandpa was exhausted, and his 4-year-old grandson had turned the house upside down. Kevin looked into the room. Dad then turned to them and pointed his finger into the room and held it to his lips. Emily and Wendy looked into the room and laughed quietly. The grandfather and grandson were sleeping right on the fluffy rug by the fireplace. Grandpa had a toy bow in his hands. Sebastian had one too. Apparently, they had been running around so much that as they played, they fell asleep. Daddy. Well, the doctor told you not to strain your body. Robert, without opening his eyes, said, who asks him to strain his body? I can't play war games now. Sebastian also woke up, held behind their backs with his eyes, and rushed to Wendy. But Daddy and Mommy let themselves be kissed too. Soon the whole family was sitting around the big holiday table. Wendy was thoughtful. Emily stroked her arm. Why are you so upset? No, Mom, I think I'm relieved. I wanted to get back at him so badly. Today I realized that he got revenge on himself. Life punished him. Emily held her daughter close to her. Well, that's good. You should never take revenge. Life will sort everything out. Robert raised his glass. I propose we drink to Wendy's success. It's a resounding success. And as an expert on the subject, I'd say there's more to come. Thank you, Grandpa. Not 5 minutes later, Robert raised his glass again. And now I'd like to toast your return. Relatives should live together, and of course, in their homeland. 5 more minutes and another glass. In an hour, Wendy, we'll put your grandfather in the bedroom. Kevin was surprised to hear Papa speak. What was that all about? You've never let yourself do that before. Robert stopped. Son, if you only knew how glad I am to have you back. You have no idea how lonely and alone I've been here. Kevin looked at him in surprise. But you never said anything. Should I have? No, I didn't want to interfere with your life. The old man went straight to sleep. Wendy said how much he had suffered and why hadn't we come back sooner. Kevin hugged her. It's all right. We'll all live together now. You'll paint. Mommy's planting flowers like she wanted. Daddy will help her. He's a lover of such beauty too. I'll finally take over the firm that's located in this town. And Wendy flicked the gum. Sebastian will go to kindergarten. He'll fight and hurt the teachers there. and we'll be scolded and called to the superintendent's office all the time. And we'll set up a line, and we'll take turns. We'll see who gives up the fastest." Wendy laughed softly and said, "Come on." Mom must have lost us. They went into the living room and saw that Emily and Evelyn were not sitting on the couch. Emily looks at the album with some surprise. "This is the album Sebastian used to draw in all the time." "Mom, what happened to your face?" "Nick, look at it." The girl looked at the album. She stared at it for a long time, then laughed. "Congratulations, there's one more artist in the family." They laughed and hugged. Sebastian, seeing such an outrage, everyone hugging, and he was not taken, he burst out loudly, and the whole family rushed to him to soothe his tears. Emily looked at her own and realized that for the sake of such a day, she would agree to go through everything she had already gone through again. It's all about the outcome, and in the end, they are all happy. Subscribe and click the bell.
The sun was slowly but surely moving toward zenith. Evelyn felt the hot rays of the sun burning her lower back through the thin cotton fabric of her t-shirt, the skin on her arms and ankles turning crimson. The woman paused for a moment to assess the extent of her defeat. What she saw shocked the woman, and she didn't hold back from commenting. By evening there will be bubbles, and then the skin will go stocking slip. I just went out, and I'm already burned." Like most blondes, Evelyn was afraid of sunbathing. Miracle creams never helped her, so she tried to stay out of the sun on particularly hot days. But to pull out today under the heat, she was forced by her neighbor. To be exact, not Nancy herself, but unwillingness to face her on the plot. She was an elderly woman in the village, disliked by many for her quarrelsome nature. Evelyn also had a bitter experience with her, and now always carefully avoided the neighbor's house. Even to the store for groceries, the young woman took a circuitous route, so as not to inadvertently stumble upon an unpleasant grandmother. For the same reason had to work in the vegetable garden in haste, and the most inopportune time. The nasty neighbor would go out to work on the beds when it was cold, and when the sun began to blaze, she would run away to her ramshackle house. There were different rumors about Nancy's building in the village, sometimes even the most ridiculous, but the landlady always called her dwelling a homestead, which pleased the local jokers. Village humorists amused the people with various pearls, the heroine of which was Nancy. The old woman in her own way perceived not humane attitude of her fellow villagers to her person. Despite her advanced years, the grandmother with youthful enthusiasm took revenge on offenders. In her arsenal were different ways, but most of all the grandmother liked to write complaints with invented facts. Nancy would file a denunciation with a policeman. "Do you think Ethan had it all worked out?" "Ethan who?" "Well, Tesla. My name may not be known yet, but who knows what will happen in 5 or 10 years?" Trying to be calm, Evelyn interrupted the sweet dreams of her loser husband. "John, you're as far away from Tesla as you are from the moon. You're a loser or a modern-day loser. Therefore, I'm going to stop subsidizing your ideas completely. And in simple terms, I'm not giving you another dime, so instead of doing this nonsense, you'd better think about your job. I can't keep you on my back forever." This reproach cut painfully on the male ego, and John's polished face immediately distorted with a grimace of hatred. "You've decided to kick me around with reproaches. Have you forgotten the shit I pulled you out of? If I hadn't married you 8 years ago, you'd still be in the pigsty. I saved you from slave labor and poverty." Evelyn knew that John was about to blame her for all his failures, so to avoid making matters worse, she went out onto the porch in silence, but her raging husband couldn't stop. "You shouldn't do that, Evelyn. You'll regret humiliating me, and you'll regret it more than once when I'm rich. It'll happen, and I'll pass you by. You'll beg me to forgive your callousness, but I won't even look in your direction." So that his expressive monologue would not be drowned in the void, the man also left the house after his wife. "Evelyn, you're lost without me. Come to your senses, you wretch. Otherwise you'll end up in a garbage dump." Noticing that his only listener was getting farther away from the house, John ran after her, but immediately fell into the trench he had dug more than a month ago. Evelyn laughed heartily. "You see, John, this is a sign from above. I remember you promised to bring water into the house, then you promised to steward the house, and all your promises are in this hole. You just dug yourself." Evelyn could hear her husband swearing as he climbed out of the grassy trench. She had long since gotten used to his flamboyant performances. Several times she had tried to get away from the scandalized man, but always something stopped her. And in the whole world, she had no one more dear to her than John. Despite his quarrelsome character, her husband never raised a hand on her, and he was not in the dense raspberries behind the neighboring fence. A quiet rustling was heard, and after a while Nancy herself appeared. "Good day to you, Evelyn, and good day to you, Nancy." Evelyn regretted that she had not noticed her neighbor in time. Now she would have to listen to the old woman's ramblings for the sake of propriety, but it didn't bother Nancy much that her appearance was not greeted with joy. She shook off from her warm vest plant debris, bloody raspberries, all chipped away, and no one cares, all abandoned. Evelyn was surprised not only by the old woman's inappropriate attire, but also by the eagerness with which she waded through the thorny shrubbery. The woman would hardly have made such a sacrifice for the sake of mere curiosity. Her hunch was at once confirmed. Nancy fixed her handkerchief on her small head, which resembled an unripe pumpkin. "Evelyn, how good it is to see you! There's a matter at hand, and I can't do without you." "I'm listening to you very carefully, Nancy." The thin lips of the old woman smiled, and her voice had an ingratiating tone. Evelyn knew she was about to ask for something. In the 8 years she'd lived with John, she'd learned to be calm about the most unusual requests, but she could tell from the way her neighbor was taking a long time to gather her thoughts that her grandmother was going to make some special demands. Nancy coughed for reassurance. "I'll tell you what, dear neighbor, my grandson, and he's a well-known man in town and almost an oligarch, has decided to revitalize our village." Although Evelyn didn't understand what her grandmother was getting at yet, she supported this initiative in absentia. It was high time to change something in our village. Grandmother was glad to have the support, and my Benjamin, too, thinks it's the right time to renew the village. He wants to build a bunch of stores and a factory to make juice. But first his grandson plans to build himself a 2-story house with an underground garage and parking lot. He told me a lot of things, but I didn't get all the details over the phone. And I'm very happy for you and your grandson. But what do I have to do with his plans? Now, honey, I'll explain everything. Benjamin likes it very much, this very spot where my manor house stands. It's close to the river and a short walk to the store. Well, but what's it got to do with me? Nancy could not bear it, and her peaceful tone changed to an angry one. What's not to understand? Our lots are right next to each other. Benjamin's house is to be built on the site of my estate. I've described everything to him in my will anyway. But my grandson wants to make a small park with a summer tent and fountains. He has 3 kids, and they need a separate place to play and have fun. Benjamin's other plans include Evelyn interrupting a pushy neighbor. "Thank you for sharing your favorite grandson's plans with me, but they don't interest me much. What do you want from me, Nancy?" The neighbor rolled her eyes in surprise. "Why do you pretend to be a silly fish, Evelyn? My grandson's got his sights set on your lot. What's not to understand? The house is registered to you, as far as I know. When Molly died, her mansion and the land passed into your hands? Am I wrong? What of it? The old woman swung her hand like she was holding a saber. All right, I can see it's no use talking to you. Benjamin will be here soon, but he'll talk differently. Don't threaten me with Nancy, and tell your Benjamin I'm not going to sell the house. Let him count on your inheritance. The old woman shook her dry fists even harder. For your malicious character, Evelyn, God will not give you children. The old woman knew how to hurt her uncooperative neighbor. She had hit the sorest spot. Evelyn grabbed a dry twig lying on the floor and threw it at Nancy. You old hag, go away. The log came down with a whistle somewhere in the bushes, but the young woman realized that she had hit exactly the target. Nancy from afar began to send threats. I'll file a police report on you. You'll get jail time for self-harm. Evelyn no longer paid attention to the shouts of the old woman. She walked slowly towards the house, trying to answer the main question. But why is all the misfortune dumped on my head? At her appearance, John perked up. Oh, is Evelyn mine? Tired? Do you want me to heat up dinner? My husband acted as if there'd never been a quarrel this morning. He fussed to the kitchen, reporting on the work done. At first, I wanted to work in the garage, but then I thought I'd clean up the stain on the ceiling. Evelyn looked up. The problem spot was covered by a slanted piece of wallpaper of a completely different shade, but the husband was very pleased with his work. Wasn't that better? The woman was so tired from the noisy morning that she twisted her heart. Yes, darling, almost imperceptible. The praise emboldened the man, and in his mind immediately activated a fantasy track. Tomorrow I'll dig a trench, or I'll break my legs. It's unlikely we'll be able to bring water into the house this summer anyway. It's gonna take a lot of money. I will complete my project. I got a patent, and then you and I will live. We will go to the south. Jean noticed that his wife did not share his joy. Evelyn, what's wrong? Is your back hurting again? The woman often complained of lower back pain. Often she couldn't get out of bed for days. Then John treated her with ointments and even gave her injections himself, but now it was obvious that his wife was in a bad mood, not because of her back. Just now, John, I had a fight with Nancy. The old witch has been ambushing me in her vegetable garden. What does she want? Not her John, but her grandson. Briefly and in general terms, they want our lot in the house. John whistled in surprise, to which Evelyn immediately reacted sharply. How many times have I told you not to whistle in the house? That's why we're always tight on money. Oh, come on, all this superstition. Personally, I do not believe in any omens. You better tell me how much they're offering for our house. John looked at his wife with the look of a 5-year-old child who came to the toy store to choose something he liked. By the way, I shared a desk with Benjamin for 3 years in junior high school. Then his parents moved to the capital. Our locals said that his dad had made it big, and that's the kind of guy who makes money. So it might be something to consider. Evelyn lowered herself gingerly into a chair. John, are you serious? Or are you joking again? What jokes, Evelyn? We're being offered money, and that doesn't happen every day. Think of the prospects. I can finish my project, which in turn will get me a lucrative contract, and then, John, why are you always talking about yourself and your plans? This is my home, by the way, and maybe you should ask my opinion about it. And then have you thought about where we're gonna live if we sell the house? The man looked at his wife with the same childish look. I'm sorry, I didn't think about it, but we can rent an apartment or part of the house for a while. All right, John, enough of this nonsense. I'm not selling the house to Benjamin or anyone else. You and your ideas are really going to make me homeless." John remained standing at a loss in the kitchen with a ladle in one hand. The man was trying to understand how he could refuse to accept money that was coming his way. Not a week after the unpleasant conversation with Nancy, the village was blessed with the arrival of Benjamin himself. The entire small population of the village poured out into the street to pay their respects to the iconic personage. Surprisingly, the scene resembled the arrival of royalty in Murom, depicted by the hand of a famous artist, only the place of the Russian empress was occupied by a successful businessman. Benjamin instantly caught the mood of the crowd. He smiled and bowed to the sides. There were, of course, those who looked at it with laughter, but most of them literally devoured their hope with their eyes. "I am glad to see you all, my fellow countrymen. I promise to do everything for the revival of our small homeland." For completeness of the picture, there was not enough candy or money, which by duty could scatter bodyguards. But for gifts, the local oligarch was apparently stingy. However, even without material support, the PR campaign was at a high level. Now everyone in the village was talking about Benjamin's arrival, and Nancy couldn't feel the ground beneath her feet with pride. John decided that he should take the opportunity too, and at dinner he said to his wife, as if by the way, "I think I ought to drop in on Benjamin. Maybe he'll remember a schoolmate." Evelyn suddenly supported her husband. "Come in. Maybe he'll at least offer you a job. If a man is planning to build, he'll need specialists. At least you'll be useful." "Of course, Evelyn, I appreciate your opinion, but I'm not a builder. I have a completely different specialty." The man spoke with an obvious challenge, alluding to his engineering degree. But his moment of glory didn't last long, because his wife mercilessly killed the untimely flight of fancy. "Your specialty, John, is sitting on my neck, and I'm tired of it. And you must realize I'm not giving you any more money. You have to start earning your own bread sometime." Another scandal was coming. John had already taken in more air in his lungs to respond with dignity to his wife's perfidy. But at that moment, there was a sudden knock at the door. The couple were very surprised to see that Mr. Benjamin himself came to visit them. The owner of the house began to make a fuss about the guest. "Welcome to our hearth. I didn't expect you to think of me, Benjamin, but it's a pleasure." The guest only nodded at the welcoming ritual, but paused. He sat down at the table, which Evelyn was promptly setting, and even drank the cup offered by his host, but that Benjamin traditionally made the first toast to the meeting. The men drank and reached for the pickles, which the hostess put on the table. "Help yourself, dear guest. My mistress makes great pickles." The businessman took another drink. "That's right, John. Only in our village women know how to pickle cucumbers." "Then let's have a drink, because it's uncomfortable to stand on one leg." "Don't think I'm not into this business, but I believe that ancestral traditions should be honored." "I agree, but don't pour me any more." "Hypertension. I don't want to die before my time. I've got a lot of work to do." Benjamin was an excellent speaker. He knew where to pause and where to raise the tone a little. Evelyn had briefly attended an art reading club at school, where they were taught how to speak properly. Now she watched the guest with undisguised interest, realizing that he did not appear to them for the sake of an old friendship with John. But the guest began from afar. "John, how many years has it been since you and I used to go trick-or-treating together at recess?" The landlord began to calculate in his mind. "Nearly 30. You left us right after 3rd grade." Benjamin sighed. "Yes, unfortunately, we can't know where life will take its next turn. I didn't think I would return to my home village one day either. But what amazes me the most is how small the world is. Why am I saying this? You're about to find out. Imagine when I shared my plan with my colleagues, there was a person in my team who also came from these places. The guest glared at Evelyn, but she calmly waited for the rest of the story. John was clearly puzzled by this turn of events. Benjamin, why are you pulling the cat out of the bag? Just tell it like it is. I didn't mean to offend you. We're not offended, but let's get to the point, Benjamin. Who's that goose in your office who can't live without our village? I think we know who he is. It's Ethan. The plate slipped out of the hands of the surprised hostess. Uncle Ethan, does he work for you? I tell you, it's a small world. After all, the guest had achieved the desired effect and was now enjoying the result. You see, dear Evelyn, I had a frank conversation with your uncle, during which it became clear that Ethan is very dissatisfied with his grandmother's death warrant. Not only that, but he considers the document invalid and even intends to contest it. Sensing an impending cloud, John intervened in the conversation. But it's impossible. You're wrong, friend. It is possible. After all, it hasn't even been a year since your grandmother died, has it? Or am I wrong, Evelyn? Evelyn felt her mouth go dry. What are you trying to say? My grandmother had her will drawn up and notarized while she was still alive. That's understandable, but you're not a direct heir. But Uncle Ethan refused, and now he's changed his mind. I suggest you reconsider. And remember, I only make a very good offer once and then. Oh, by the way, John, I'm planning to start construction before the fall, so I need reliable people. Can I offer you a job as an old friend? But I'm not a builder. I'm more of an iron worker. That's fine. Will you be foreman or forewoman? Agreed? John stretched out. Well, I'm always ready. Then come over tomorrow. I'm staying at my grandmother's, but it's only temporary. As soon as I get things settled, I'll be back in town. What about construction? That's why I'm looking for reliable people who can be trusted with serious business and money. As soon as the door closed behind the guest, John cursed. What a creep, that Uncle Ethan of yours. Evelyn said quietly, I didn't expect him to be so mean either. How much misery has he caused, Mom? He's taking it out on me too. Evelyn's mother and grandmother had carefully avoided talking about her father when she was very young, and she hadn't been much interested in the matter either. But later she tried several times to find out where her father was and why he lived in another country. Uncle Ethan decided to enlighten her niece, Mother's own brother. One day at a family dinner he said, I think, Camille, it's time to tell the girl. Evelyn remembers well the mother's belittling look at her brother. Ethan, please don't. You know perfectly well that William is not to blame. Then who is? No, sweet sister. He left you with a 1-year-old child to go to your uncle's. He traded you and your daughter for money. Suddenly, the grandmother supported her son. Yes, that's exactly what happened. It's you, Camille, because of your blind love, did not finish the institute and could have made it in the people, if not for the early marriage. A 15-year-old girl was uncomfortable listening to her grandmother and uncle reproach her mom for loving her father so much. Evelyn decided to stand up for her mother. Is love a crime? The grandmother looked at her granddaughter. You're too young to reason. When you have children yourself, you'll know what it's like to raise them. I raised 2 of them on my own, worked 2 jobs, and kept piglets, and all for the sake of educating my children. Thank you that at least Ethan became a man, but Camille didn't appreciate my efforts. She fell in love. She got married in her 3rd year, and soon you were born. Grandma was ready to continue the story, but Mom shouted at her. Please do not fool the child's head. It was your efforts that made me a single mother. It was you, Mom, who then played a comedy with your illness when William came to fetch us. It was you who separated daughter and father. After this, the relatives began to shower each other with reproaches. Evelyn was disgusted with them and ran away to a friend's house. And soon there was a misfortune with my mother. When she was feeding the pigs, and my grandmother had 8 of them, she was attacked by a wild boar. The woman screamed for a long time, but no one heard her. Only late in the evening, Grandma suddenly realized, "Evelyn, where's Camille?" I saw her come home from work, and then she disappeared. The girl found her mother unconscious. When the hospital x-rayed her, the doctors were shocked. Poor thing. She had multiple fractures, damaged internal organs. Mom was in the hospital for months. She had one operation after another, but she got weaker and weaker every day. Evelyn ran straight to the hospital after school and sat by her sick mother's bedside for hours. Lessons had to be done late at night. Grandmother visited her daughter only 3 times. I have no time to go to hospitals. If I don't feed them in time, they'll go to waste. And Evelyn, you'd be less likely to go there, just for 5 minutes, and that's enough. I can't do without a helper. One day, Evelyn couldn't stand the injustice. Grandma, aren't you ashamed? Mom is your own daughter, and you treat her as if she were your stepdaughter. But everything is for Uncle Ethan, and those pigs, and the damn boar that trampled on Mama. Everything is for him, too. The shocked Molly could not utter a word, and Evelyn cried and screamed with resentment. I heartily wished that boar would die. The old woman immediately came to her senses and slapped her granddaughter. I wish your tongue was dead. The boar weighs over 10 pounds. That evening, Evelyn did not come home to spend the night. She spent the night sitting next to her mother, whose condition had deteriorated sharply. The woman was falling into a restless sleep, then calling her. In the morning she asked, "Daughter, at home, in my album there are pictures where we are all together, you and me, and your dad. Don't believe it. He's a very good man. It's just that everything's worked out against us. If I get better, you and I will go to my dad. There's his address right to him." 2 days later, Mom died. Evelyn looked for the picture the dying woman had mentioned in the papers, but she couldn't find it. And then she forgot about that picture, because a completely different life began for her. Now all household chores fell on the fragile shoulders of a 16-year-old girl. After school, she would run home to feed the pigs and chickens. Then she had to weed the beds that stretched as far as the horizon. During summer vacations, when school friends and girlfriends went to the sea with their parents or vacationed in health camps, Evelyn did not unbend her back from morning till late in the evening. The list of her duties was enormous, and her grandmother made sure that every item was completed. Twice a year, Uncle Ethan came in from out of town. He would fill the car to the brim with groceries, and without hiding his pleasure, drive back. The hard labor took its toll on the girl's health. She was found to have a herniated spine, and later doctors discovered a problem in the female side. So John was right about one thing. He did spare her from slave labor when he proposed to become his wife. Molly took the news of her granddaughter's marriage in stride. She threw a tantrum. I'm everything to her, and she decided to throw me away. Ungrateful. The future son-in-law listened to these unfair claims and advised Molly to attract his son to hard labor. To the grandmother, this suggestion amounted to an insult, and she shoved John out the door. It was then that Evelyn first disobeyed her old grandmother and left home with her fiancé. At one time, they were staying with her husband's parents, where John's brother John and his family lived. About a year passed, and Molly showed up for a visit. The woman cried for a long time, complained about her fate, and then fell on her knees in front of her granddaughter and began to ask for her forgiveness. "Forgive me, Evelyn. Forgive me for everything. Since you left me, I can't find a place for myself. Please come back. Live with me at my place. I've used up all the livestock. No, I don't have the health to take care of animals." It was unbearable to watch the humiliation of a native person, and the young people returned to Molly's house. Grandmother behaved quietly, tried not to interfere in the family affairs of her granddaughter. She was often ill, and Evelyn did not leave her bedside for 24 hours, just like when her mother was dying. Molly was very homesick, and she was even more worried about Uncle Ethan. "Evelyn, you should call him." "What's wrong? Why isn't he coming? He forgot his mother." The girl dialed her uncle's number many times, but he immediately referred to the lack of time. John sincerely felt sorry for the old woman. He heard these requests, but only Evelyn once in the heart said everything he thought about her uncle. "That's your Uncle Ethan, you bastard. When the old woman was dying, tending the cattle so that he and his children could eat, then he'd show up. And the helpless mother, he has no time to visit her. For 6 years, the son only once visited his mother, but stayed only an hour." Shortly after this visit, Molly and decided to redo the will in favor of her granddaughter. Shortly before her death, she gave her a photograph of her happy parents holding her in their arms. On the back of the photo was an address in English. "It's all my fault, Evelyn. I didn't want Camille to go abroad, and I separated her from William. He was a positive guy, he was already a candidate, and he was invited to work there. And then we came to get you, and I wouldn't let Camille go. But the worst part was that when he called once, I lied and said that Camille had married a good man." Evelyn listened to her grandmother's confession, but her anger was gone. She realized that nothing could be changed and forgave her grandmother. After her death, there was only one close person left in the whole world. Evelyn was afraid that one day he would betray her, but there is a belief that what one fears will happen one day. Just as Benjamin had promised, in August a big construction project was underway in the village. John enthusiastically took up the task assigned to him. From early in the morning until late at night, he was at the site he was entrusted with. With his wife, he rarely shared his work, answering her questions unambiguously. "Everything is normal. The work is going on. The salary drops into the account." But a month passed, then the second, but the promised salary was not brought to the house. He completely forgot about his super project and rarely visited the garage. As it turned out later, Evelyn had no idea what her husband had done with other people's money. It all came out of the blue. One day John came home earlier than usual, his face pale as chalk and his hands shaking. "Evelyn, I need money right away. Lots of money." The woman's heart sank in a premonition of bad things to come. "What's wrong?" That simple question sent her husband into a rage. For the first time in his life, he took a swing at her. "Why do you feign saintly naivete? I thought I told you in plain language that I need money, and it's urgent. Are you my wife or not?" Evelyn was silent. She was shivering, and her hands and feet were ice cold. At last she got over her excitement. "I too, John, asked you in plain language. What's wrong? I have a right to know. You're singing about your rights again. This is all your fault, sending me to work for that ashhole. You don't have enough money. I think you're the one who's been stealing it from me. What should I do this time? Help me. For the last time, let's sell the Dan house while that bastard's offer still stands. Can you explain to me properly why this is so urgent? All right, look. I just got screwed again, and I've decided to temporarily divert some of the money Benjamin gave me for materials to another project. What was it? There was a lucrative venture, and I thought I'd invest in it for a nice dividend. But it didn't work out. I ran into some crooks, and today, as luck would have it, Benjamin demanded all the invoices. That's the story. Evelyn didn't want to hear from the man anymore. She didn't care anymore. All right, if we sell this house, or if Uncle Ethan sues us for it anyway, where do you think you're going to live? That was a question John couldn't answer. Uncle Ethan showed up in the morning. Well, weren't you expecting young people? I see that I've been on your heads like a snowball. But it's a good thing, because you can put all the dots on the inheritance question. Well, I filed a lawsuit to review this case, of course. I hired a good lawyer, so not to spoil the nerves of neither you nor myself, I suggest you move out of your parents' house. After all, anyway, then the bailiffs will put you out, and that the judges will decide the case in my favor, I do not doubt at all. I'm the son and Evelyn is the granddaughter. The law is on my side, and the fact that my mother made a will before she died, she wasn't in her right mind, I've got the certificate. In short, I'll give you 24 hours. Uncle Ethan left. Evelyn began to pack her things. John asked in surprise, "Where are you going?" "Wherever I want to go." "What about me? Don't you realize that Benjamin will roll me for money?" At that moment, the door opened wide, and the autumn wind blew in. John looked at Benjamin with horror. "Wow! And we were just thinking about you and your wife, just like the proverb says. Think of something and it will appear." The joke turned out to be a bad one, and the next moment, John's body slammed into the opposite wall. Why, Benjamin? You know why. Ignoring Evelyn and John, who was in pain, the guest defiantly set the table in the center of the living room. Well, are we going to joke again, or are we going to talk seriously? I'm talking to both of you. And to you, Evelyn, that goes for you too. What's it got to do with me? He wasted your money, deal with him. No, that wasn't the deal. John, your husband? What's that supposed to mean? Because my guys are gonna cut him to ribbons. He's a big hit, but this time he won't make it between construction sites. I need the money. John made it out of the corner. Benjamin, honestly, I'll make it up to you. I'll work on your construction site for free for a year. That's a good point, but it's not you, Ashole, it's your wife. And for you as a punishment, I have picked up another mission, and I don't think you will like it, but there are no other options if you want to live. John began to crawl on his knees in front of Benjamin. It was disgusting to watch this picture of humiliation. And Evelyn grabbed her suitcase, but the guest squeezed her hand, but the woman tried to break free. Let go, you're hurting me. But Benjamin squeezed the vise even harder. Evelyn screamed, Madam, it will hurt you even more if I entrust you to my boys. They like to work on women, so you'd better keep your head down. Well, you're loaning your woman out. I am, Benjamin. You can have her forever. Evelyn watched her husband tearfully crawl at the feet of his former classmate. She felt no pity for him, only contempt and disdain. Benjamin read all of this in the betrayed woman's gaze. He took her suitcase with one hand and led her to the exit. At the door, Evelyn turned around as if she were saying goodbye to her past life forever. Come on, you don't want to disturb yourself with such an unpleasant sight. Benjamin pushed the woman lightly toward the exit. The door slammed shut, but outside they could hear John wailing at the top of his voice. Evelyn, stay. I shall perish without you. The businessman spat contemptuously. You wretch, it's you who will be doomed if you stay with this man. Forgive me for some inflection, but I'm really ready to tear John apart. He's been such a jerk to me. I don't know how to untie myself now. Benjamin's words sounded quite human, and Evelyn looked at him in surprise. "I don't understand. Do you really want me to be your slave?" "Yes and no." "Come, let's talk. I have a proposition for you. You can refuse, of course, but then I'll ask you to return all the money your husband has squandered. Anyway, he's still your husband, but you'll still take the house, won't you?" Benjamin nodded. "I will, and no one can stop me, as you have already realized. But the only problem is that the money the house is worth won't be enough to pay off the debt. Do you have any idea how much he cut me off? You see, on the one hand, I don't care about anyone who lives here. You're a smart woman, I think you know that, and I don't care about your idiot husband. The fact that I'll give him a chance is a big deal for you." Benjamin stopped in front of his car, opened the door for Evelyn. "You all believe in miracles here in the village. Miracles don't happen. In the city, they would have killed the whole family for that amount of money, and I'm talking to you." He put Evelyn in the car. They drove off. Evelyn felt her heart pounding. "I want to tell you right away, Evelyn, if you think about running away, your John will be totally screwed. So a man's life depends on you." Evelyn understood now. So sorry, so sorry. And what should I do? Most importantly, for how long? How long, I haven't counted it yet. It all depends on your work. But what to do now, you'll see. They drove to the edge of the village. There was no way to see it from the village, and now Evelyn was numb. It had changed completely in a matter of months. Huge greenhouses stood in rows, apples and pears were planted, and some other trees that were unfamiliar to Evelyn. A large wooden building stood a little to the side. Here, someone should be in charge of all this, not only to work, but also to make others work and to be responsible. Do you understand, Evelyn? Not really. But look, you'll do a good job, and everyone should do a good job, and I'll be there to watch. And if you don't do a good job, the debt won't go down. And if the debt doesn't go down, you'll have to work here for a long time. Only now Evelyn realized what a trap she'd fallen into. And John will work off the debt too, won't he? Benjamin laughed. No, Evelyn, your husband's as useless as a goat's milk. Not only is he an idler, but he's also a thief. So you, and only you, will repay the debt. But that's not fair. Evelyn almost cried. Where have you seen justice in our world, Evelyn? Besides, you heard yourself that your husband gave you to me for debts. I'm going to the police. The woman grasped the doorknob with determination. Of course you will. I've got plenty of testimony about how you and your husband cleaned me out together. Believe me, for that amount of money, you two will go to jail for a long time. You're such scum. Benjamin laughed again. I have to agree with you there. If I wasn't trash, I'd be living, like you and John, in utter poverty and dung. Shall we go? I'll help you carry the suitcase. They came to a wooden building. There was no other word for it, as Evelyn realized she wasn't the first one here. A woman came out to them, looking more like a man. Well, what else did they bring? Is it any good, or is it just as inept as the others? Well, Wendy, that's what you're here for, to keep everyone working like a bee. Wendy laughed. You know I have a fly to collect honey. Benjamin turned around and walked to the car without saying goodbye. Evelyn caught up with him. Don't forget to count the debt, so I know how long I have to work here. I'll do that when I have time. Don't worry, you'll be working here for a long time. Still, I might want to pay you back in money. Benjamin looked at her like she was crazy and went on his way. As it turned out, there were already several unfortunates like Evelyn here. One was working off her husband's debt, who had recklessly wrecked Benjamin's car, and her husband was at home babysitting. They had 2 children. The second had racked up credit, and Benjamin had saved her. She thought he was a kind man and ended up here. In fact, they were all here voluntarily, well, or almost voluntarily, because if any of them left, quit their jobs, the problems would pour in like a cornucopia. Benjamin didn't keep anyone by force. You could go home, you could go home. True, Evelyn didn't have a home. She got out a week later, wanted to show John what her hands had become and spit in his face. But she came out and the house was gone. In place of the house, where her favorite roses had grown, construction was in full swing. Evelyn cried and turned back. Evelyn? She turned around. Standing next to her was Grandma Clara. She used to come to them often when her grandmother was alive. She used to swear at her grandmother, but she didn't take offense. They had been friends for a long time. "Hello, Baba Clara," Evelyn sighed. "I don't understand something. The house has been sold. There's no one here. I saw John leaving with his suitcases. Why aren't you with him?" "I'm not with him. I'm working." "For Benjamin? They say he doesn't pay at all. He's trying to cheat, or are people lying?" She waved her hand and cried, "What are you, a girl? Tell me, what happened to you? I haven't seen you in 6 months, and already you've changed so much." Evelyn and Grandma Clara sat down on the grass and Evelyn told her everything. She knew she couldn't help her, but she felt a little better. The old woman shook her head. "I don't know who's the bigger bitch in this situation. You're John or Benjamin? But Benjamin is understandable. He grew up to be a bastard from a young age. But John, I'd kill him." "It's all your fault, Evelyn. You should have sent him to work, not let him eat." "Where have you seen that?" "A big forehead sitting on his grandmother's neck." Baba Clara spat and sat and thought, "That's it, Evelyn. You should look for your father." Evelyn looked at Clara in amazement. "And you know about him?" "Well, who doesn't know about him? But if you're younger, but William was a good guy. Molly, she's such a bastard. She looks like Benjamin. What's she been doing with this farm all her life? She's got herself a golden coffin or something. She couldn't let Camille go, not out of love, but because someone had to look after her farm. It can't be, Grandmother said. She just didn't want to part with us." Clara waved her hand. "You can think what you like, of course, but I knew your grandmother much better than that. Never needed anyone for her but her Ethan. God damn it, every man is a piece of shit. Maybe we're in an abnormal zone here." Clara wondered. Evelyn smiled. Clara's grandmother had always loved everything unusual and otherworldly. Her daughter fought with her as much as she could. Twice they extinguished the house, because Clara lit candles from the evil power and forgot about them. All right, we managed. Once my daughter wanted to heat the stove. The frosts were fierce then. She opened the flap, and instead of a place to put firewood, there was a fresh brickwork. It's good that she didn't have time to grasp it. They broke it, and Clara too. She was making a hole in the world. Grandma was good at everything, but if something got into her head, the old lady never saw Evelyn again. She quickly got up, looked around, and authoritatively declared to herself, "That's right, abnormal. We must save the world." She walked briskly into the village. Evelyn sighed. "Yes, you'll have a hard time with her. Who knows when she'll get it into her head?" When Evelyn returned, the neighbor was lying on her stomach, texting on her laptop. "Lisa, listen, is it real, for example, in the same social networks to find a person abroad?" "Of course it's real. Why do you ask? Did you find a rich relative who is ready to pay for you?" "Oh, come on. I just wanted to try to find one. So let's try. I've talked to my folks. I've cried, so I'm free. How much longer?" 2 months. and then I'm free if I don't get any more fines. Evelyn sighed. By her calculations, she'd be working here for almost a year, and that was if there were no fines, and fines came very quickly. She pulled out a picture, showed it to Lisa, who started typing something quickly. Look, there it is. Evelyn's palms were sweating. There's what? A man with that name. Evelyn, look, he's online. Lisa, don't speak in riddles? Well, he's online now. Come on, what should I write him? Nothing, are you crazy? No, what do you mean you don't text him? You need him for something. Evelyn remembered John, remembered her home, her whole life, and gave up. At least it's an outlet. Write hello, William. This is Evelyn, Camille's daughter. Lisa chuckled. You're like a letter from the front. Lisa, I'll be quiet, I'll be quiet. Oh, look, I read it. Aye, she hasn't said a word yet. Probably won't answer. Evelyn lay down and was just about to doze off when Lisa pushed her. He did. That's a hell of a thing to say. Well, read it, and I'm going to go have a smoke so I don't get in the way. Evelyn looked at Lisa gratefully and sat down in front of the laptop. She read the words, wiped her tears, reread again. Lisa returned and saw Evelyn all in tears. She sighed. That's what, Mother. The laptop is on your bed, and I need to sleep. I don't want to get it tomorrow. Don't stay up too long. You have to work tomorrow, too. William apologized for not convincing Camille to go against Molly's wishes, for being resentful and not letting on for years. Then work got in the way, one thing and another. When he woke up, he decided he didn't need him anymore. Camille's been married a long time, and the daughter probably calls that man Daddy. Mom had never been married, not even one day. William was silent for a while. Evelyn thought he would never answer again. I had the thought, but then I decided that no matter how cruel Molly was, she wouldn't lie like that. So she did. Do you have a wife, kids? Evelyn, you don't have to tell me. I have no one. I tried to get married. I lasted 6 months twice, but I called my wives, Camille. And then I stopped trying. And God didn't give me children. I mean, He did, but I lost them. But it's not your fault, is it? Another long pause. It's my fault. It's always the man's fault, because he should be stronger, wiser, smarter, you know? It's all my fault. And now I'm dying. I don't have much time left, and I was still afraid to write to you. Dying? Why? There's Evelyn, a disease that doesn't look at places or people. It just goes and takes whoever it wants with it. Of course, Evelyn knew everything. She felt tears running down her cheeks. It was so hurtful, so painful to realize that she had just found her father and wouldn't even get to see him. Evelyn, why don't we video call tomorrow? Oh, I don't know how to do that. If Lisa says it's okay, she'll help you. So that's not you in the picture. No, of course I'll ask her. See you tomorrow. Evelyn has been getting reprimands all day. She got so many fines that Lisa couldn't take it anymore. She was waiting in the greenhouse next to Evelyn. What's wrong with you today? Lisa, you see, that man you found yesterday, he's my father. And Evelyn briefly told her the story of her family. Lisa exhaled. Wow, I'm sorry, your family is a mess. Evelyn, so maybe he's rich? Evelyn stared at her with an uncomprehending stare. Even if he is, which I doubt, so what? So what? He could just pay off that creep, and you'd be free. Oh, Lisa, you say that too. A man dies and I have to ask for money? We've never met. What's the big deal? You're so interesting, you're used by everyone, and you can't. I won't. If you'll let me, we'd like to talk on the video conference today. Oh, you're such an idiot. Tell me, of course. What do you want me to do?" As soon as my father saw her, he cried, "God, you look just like Camille. How is she?" "Mom's dead." "Dead? And Grandma?" "She's gone too." They talked for almost an hour. Then they said goodbye. "They're putting me in the hospital tomorrow. They won't let me die in peace. And then I'll write to you again." "All right, I'll be waiting." When a crying Evelyn returned the laptop, and Lisa asked, "So did you tell him about your life?" "No, why?" "You should see him, he's so sick." "Oh, Evelyn, oh, stupid." Evelyn fell asleep almost immediately. She woke up in the night and saw Lisa sitting on her laptop. She even asked, "What's wrong, what?" Lisa jumped up. "What?" "No, the kid has a fever." "Go back to sleep." "I'm going to bed too." And the workday began again. Evelyn learned to ignore the pain in her back, learned not to look at her bloody hands. She just worked and counted the days. What was the use of counting them? 5 would be taken away, 2 added for fines. Benjamin showed up from time to time. He seemed to take a special pleasure in humiliating Evelyn, probably because she was a native of the village where the oligarch himself was born and almost grew up. "Evelyn, you don't look so good." Admittedly, when you lived with your husband, you looked much better. But although it's probably much better to live like behind a stone wall, and he chuckled at his own joke, Evelyn was silent. She wanted to slap his fat face, but she knew she couldn't. A week passed, then another. Every night when Lisa opened her laptop, Evelyn looked at her questioningly, but she just shook her head. Evelyn's father was no longer online. The day came when the disgruntled warden gave Lisa her papers. Everyone came out to see her off. Lisa took Evelyn aside. "I'm sorry. I'm probably the reason your dad hasn't been in touch anymore. But you know, to me, it's better than no father at all." "I don't know what you mean." Evelyn looked at Lisa and really didn't understand anything. Lisa sighed. "The day you talked to him, I texted him back, and I told him all about your story, about your debt, about your husband, about everything. And he said he'd help, and then I guess he changed his mind." "Lisa, why?" Lisa shook her head. "Because, is he a father or not? He's never helped you once in his life, and now he can. You may or may not be offended, but I think I did the right thing." Lisa left and Evelyn returned to her room lost. Now, even if her dad does show up online, she won't know about it. Well, then it's not fate. 7 more months ahead, no time to think and dream at all. Just before Christmas, when the main job was over and the new one was just beginning, Evelyn decided to go to the store. She had nowhere to live, of course, but Christmas is Christmas. Even the warden had gone home for the weekend, though no one could believe she had a family at all. At the store, the clerk crossed her arms when she saw Evelyn. "Evelyn, you?" "I'm Kathy." "Why are you looking at me like I'm a ghost?" "Well, Evelyn, no offense, but you've aged 20 years. "I know, Kathy, I know. Why don't you sell it to me quick before somebody else does?" "Yeah, sure." Kathy ran around the store, picking up what Evelyn was showing and talking nonstop. "What, do you work for our tycoon?" "I do, but they say he doesn't pay at all, and the people aren't happy. He evicted people from their homes, not the whole village, but only those who couldn't fight back. And he's ruined everything with his construction." Evelyn grinned. It can't be. Remember how they greeted him, almost throwing their hats in the air? Kathy looked at her. "You shouldn't say that, Evelyn. People really thought the village would be revived, but now it feels like he's a landowner and everyone else is a serf." Evelyn was silent. She knew what serfs were like. "Did you hear yours?" Evelyn was on her way out, but stopped. Yours is playing in town. Huh. Well, he lost a lot of money. They say he was beaten up for his debts, even hospitalized. And then our people met him. He said he was getting married. An old woman, but rich? Evelyn laughed. Oh, John, he wants to ride a crooked mare to heaven. The mood lightened a little. Evelyn took the road she had not taken in a long time, so as not to see an empty place instead of her home. But the place was no longer empty. There was a new house, which was made under the old. She stood for a while and went on her way. She didn't even notice how a figure separated from the house and followed her. Excuse me, could you please tell me how I can find Evelyn? She stopped. She didn't know this man, and she'd never seen him before. In fact, he was kind of strange and dressed differently and had a fashionable haircut. I'm Evelyn. Who are you? Oh, for some reason I thought it was you. You look just like your mom. He pulled out the exact same picture she had. My heart sank. Who are you? My name is James. I'm your father's executor. Now Evelyn realized what confused her the most. Was this man pronouncing words too correctly, like a speech therapist or a foreigner? Is there somewhere we can talk, but out of sight? I take it we don't need eyes on us just yet. Well, if only on the shore, where the kids go in summer, but now there's no one there. They walked to the river. Evelyn shook the snow off the bench and sat down. What are you doing? The bench is cold. She smiled. I can't stand. My back really hurts. She pulled her hand out of the mitten, and the man rounded his eyes when he saw her bruised, haggard hands. Why are you like this? Evelyn quickly hid her hands in the mittens. What did you want to talk to me about? Is Papa dead? Yes. William passed away 2 months ago, but in the hospital, in the presence of a notary witnesses, he gave clear orders regarding you. We never got a chance to talk, to sit down. Evelyn wiped away a tear. What orders? The man sat down beside her and opened the folder. The orders are very simple. William instructed me to give you everything he had. I suspect you won't agree to go abroad. He sold everything he had there 2 weeks before he died. All the money, all the assets and more are now yours. I, as his advisor and assistant, will stay with you for the first time. I will help you, so that no one will cheat you, so that you will be able to invest the money profitably. As soon as you understand everything, I will be able to leave you. I'm aware of your problem. The first thing I suggest is that you pay off your debt, which will cause a lot of trouble for the person who dumped it on you. The second thing is to get a good night's rest and a good night's sleep, and only then do business. Evelyn stared at him in amazement. Money so much that it's enough for a debt. The man smiled. Your money is enough to pay 1,000 such debts. He couldn't stand it, he laughed. You have such a face now. William was a very wealthy man. His work was insanely valued, but he was far from the richest. So how do I get in touch with this man? Through the warden. James's eyebrows flew upwards. I'm sorry, I must have misheard you. Evelyn laughed now. Oh, now you should see your face. Let's go down the road and I'll tell you all about it. Tell me, is English your first language? Oh, my grandmother. James told her a whole story about how his grandmother had once fled America, but made her children and grandchildren speak only English at home. By the time Evelyn finished her story, they had reached the wooden structure where Wendy stood with her arms at her sides. What's up, Queen? Another fine. Evelyn wanted to start making excuses, as she usually did, but James stepped forward. I beg your pardon, who are you? Who are you? I'm Evelyn's attorney. I'd very much like to speak to the man to whom Evelyn allegedly owes money. Wendy, who hadn't even had a chance to change out of her city clothes yet, reached into her pocket for her phone. "I'll call now, of course." Lawyer: "Well, that's funny. Please tell Mr. Benjamin to grab his lawyer or notary. Only in the presence of two persons we will transfer the debt to him." Wendy already looked at James in amazement and stepped farther away to explain to the owner what was the matter. The girls came out of the outbuilding. They looked at Evelyn with envy. She gave them a hug. "Don't you think I'm not leaving you? James says he will take Benjamin at once, and very soon he will be where he ought to be." The girls sighed, hugged Evelyn, and asked her to come and see them, even if it didn't work out. Benjamin arrived an hour later. In that time, Evelyn and those who worked with her had time to decorate the Christmas tree in the yard. Strangely, Wendy didn't even chase the others away to work. She sat and quietly pondered whether she should run away already or whether she could still work. "Who's so wealthy around here?" James stood up. "Good afternoon. I'm Evelyn's attorney. She'd like to pay you some money. You, in turn, must give a receipt and write that you have no claims against her." "Oh, I can't believe it, Evelyn. Are you a foreigner or something?" "That's right. I was Evelyn's father's attorney and trustee, and now I'm helping Evelyn with what's called an inheritance, and the big inheritance." Benjamin's smile faded a little. He remembered those conversations from his childhood, when adults had said that Evelyn had a father abroad, but no one knew for sure, and it turned out to be true. The inheritance, apparently, is not bad at all, since even from there the man flew. After 2 o'clock, Benjamin, sweating, looked at the departing couple. The man who had come with him said, "Oh, Benjamin, the guy is very competent. He can twist this receipt so that you will not feel bad. If I were you, I'd wrap it up real quick and sit tight." "No way. I was not born to be told what to do by Benjamin." The man shook his head. "Well, that's for you to say. It's my business to warn you. And yes, and I'm sorry, I can't work with you anymore. I don't feel like sitting down for company." He got into his car and drove away quickly. Benjamin turned around and saw the women who worked for him, or rather worked off their debts. "What are you looking at? You can leave, but only temporarily. Whoever wants to can continue working. The salary is twice as much." After 20 minutes, he and Wendy were the only ones left. Wendy took out a travel bag. "You, Benjamin, have calculated me. I'm going too." He looked at her angrily. "Well, you'll get around. You have to work, and you're running away." "Well, I'll get by, I'll get by. I think the journalists in our town would be very interested to hear me." Wendy laughed. She very rarely laughed, and rightly so. Her laughter was like the bleating of a goat. Benjamin threw a wad of money on the table and walked out. James brought Evelyn to the most beautiful hotel in town. "This is your room. Mine is across the hall. You get some rest and sleep, and I'll be there, say 5 o'clock. We'll order dinner, and I'll give you everything. And then we'll figure it out as we go along." "Okay. Thank you very much." She didn't get much sleep. She took a bath, dried her hair, thought about buying some cream. Her hands were sore. Her skin chapped from work. Decided that later, tonight to rest, but she never got to sleep. In the evening, James handed her a card. "This is your card. It's automatic. You can use it to pay for anything you want. Here's the paperwork. It's new. I haven't activated it yet. This is what you need to read. Here's the patent information. You are now the owner of a brand of healing equipment. When you get up to speed, you'll need to renegotiate with some of the companies that manufacture them." Evelyn looked at him with those eyes. "Don't be afraid of anything. You'll figure it all out, and I'll help you. You have very tired eyes. I suggest we split up and go to bed. And tomorrow, you could go to the barber shop. I don't know. What else do women need to be happy? All the business can wait. Thank you, James. Can I ask you a question? Yes, of course. You're here with me, but I suppose you have a family waiting for you at home? He froze for a second. No, my family died. My wife and young son were killed in the mountains. I didn't want to live either. If it weren't for your father, we wouldn't be talking right now. Please forgive me. It's okay. You didn't know. Good night to you. To be honest, Evelyn was even a little tired of having fun. In the morning, while James was probably asleep, she quietly left the room. Through the night, she slept like she was a carefree infant. She waved for a cab. The car immediately stopped in front of her. Where are we going? Do you know where we have expensive, fashionable clothing stores in the city? The elderly man smiled. I know everything. 15 minutes later, he stopped at a magician's shop. He's so handsome. She paid the cab driver and went inside. A woman immediately approached her. What are you interested in? Evelyn looked around and answered with a smile. Everything. The woman raised an eyebrow, immediately snapped her fingers, and 2 young girls appeared beside her. Cindy, lingerie, Kelly, dress and suits, and I'll take care of outerwear. 2 o'clock Evelyn was like being in a fashion show. She tried on so many things. Most she put off to buy. One outfit, a pantsuit paired with a short mink coat she really liked. The woman who met her suddenly said, "Wait, you can't go outside in those shoes." She quickly dialed someone's number. And already in 10 minutes, Evelyn did not even have time to finish her coffee. A girl with several boxes appeared in the store. Now we're all set. Do you want your clothes packed? Can you throw them away? The woman smiled. With great pleasure. There's a great beauty parlor nearby. The owner is a friend of mine. If you want, I'll call and ask to be taken off the waiting list. Oh, thank you. I'd love to. The beauty parlor was literally 2 houses down. Next to the entrance to the salon where the grocery store entrance was, Evelyn smiled to herself. A year ago, she would have chosen that entrance. John had been stomping outside the store for an hour now. What kind of person was Miranda? She'd gone to get something nice for dinner and had been at the store for an hour. On the one hand, it's good, because I don't have to listen to her stupid jokes and endure her endless touching. On the other hand, I can't leave. Miranda already bought him a car. It may not be the most expensive, but John's never had one. And she promised that if he behaved well, she'd pay off his debt. It wasn't a huge debt, but John had nowhere to get it, and they could beat his head off for it. So he was on his best behavior, trying to do his best. John, are you there? He turned around sharply. Oh, how he hated unexpected meetings with acquaintances, because most of them owed him money. Kathy? Hi. It was just the clerk from the village store. You didn't come to the city from your village, did you? Yeah, I did. I need to pick up a few things. Yeah, there's nothing in the village. Kathy took a look at the car. I see you bought a car. John grimaced. Oh, don't. Evelyn works there, and you're so bad. It's not my fault Benjamin picked it out. Kathy raised an eyebrow in surprise. I wasn't going to. And Evelyn's not working. She paid that Benjamin, and she's free to go. In fact, her lawyer made such a mess of it that he shut his company down in a flash. Kathy, are you confused? What's her lawyer? Where from? Oh, you probably don't know anything. Evelyn's father turned up and died. And he lived abroad. He was a millionaire, even more. So now Evelyn is the heiress to the whole fortune. You're lying. I didn't think so. The women who worked there told me that her lawyers said she'd put everyone in jail and buy them all. Kathy was pleased with the effect it had. Of course, no Broads had said anything, but let the creep know. Kathy went about her business, and John wondered, what does that mean? His wife is like a cheese and butter, and he has to live with an old woman to get by on a trifle. It's not right. What we need to do is this. We've got to get back to Evelyn. John's mind was already churning with the most fantastic ideas. He turned around and became numb. A cab that had stopped nearby was being driven by a woman. Or rather, it wasn't a woman, it was a queen. Expensive fur coat, hairdo, high-heeled boots. John rubbed his eyes. No, there could be no mistake. It was Evelyn. While he was thinking, the cab drove off, taking his wife with it. Oh, you weren't lying, Kathy. Before he could think, a shrill voice came from across the street. John, why are you standing there like a statue? Or do you think I'm going to carry the bags myself to feed you? John jerked and turned around. His Miranda was standing on the front porch of the store. Fat, 15 years older than him, wealthy, as he now realized, very relatively, wealthy Miranda. What are you looking at? Get the bags. John saw how passers-by paid attention to them, how they smiled. He moved towards Miranda, walked over, pulled out his car keys and threw them at her. Fuck you. Find yourself another asshole. What? You've got some nerve. You won't get a dime. You can get your ass cut off in the back alley for dead. But John was already striding down the street, thinking how he could find out where Evelyn was. Certainly not in the village. She's got nowhere to live. Oh, I should have asked Kathy more. John had to go to the village. He even had to spend the night at a neighbor's house. But in 3 days he had gathered all the information he needed. The only thing left was to borrow money for flowers. He couldn't go to his wife empty-handed, could he? Evelyn studied the papers. For the past hour, she had been familiarizing herself with the techniques that helped people get back on their feet. It was confusing at first, then interesting, and by the end of the reading, she was sure it was a real miracle. She had even read many testimonials when even those who were considered hopeless started walking. I mean, it's so necessary, but I understand it's all just overseas. Yes, there is something like that here, but only in the capital. Evelyn thought for a moment. James, correct me if I'm wrong, if such a hospital is located in nature, but, for example, in our village, it would be more useful, wouldn't it? The man smiled faintly. What can I say? Well done. Immediately grasped the essence, all thought out. Of course, you see, without walks, sunbaths, and all that, the treatment is much longer. It's a pity Benjamin took our village. We have such nature there. You know, Evelyn, you and I are alike after all. I really liked it there too. Everything is so real, so natural, isn't it? And Benjamin, perhaps it's time to take care of him. You know, to free the village from his yoke. Is that possible? Nothing is impossible in this world, especially if you have money. By the way, I looked at the location of the houses. It would make a great hospital, where the strongest of the world can improve their health. And that's money, and that's a lot of money, and that's jobs. James, if we do it, we'll be the biggest smarties of all. He smiled. After Evelyn had returned from her girls' camping trip, he had not recognized her at first. When he did, he was confused. She couldn't have been that beautiful. When he realized she could have been, he finally died. Now the most important thing was not to show her how he felt about her, because it would turn out that he had come along with the money to the Harris. They discussed some details, and James went to his room. The phone rang. Evelyn, there's a man here asking for you. He's dying to see you. Who? It's your husband. My what? My husband. I'll be right down. You can't let him in here. She left the room and ran into James. Evelyn, your face is gone. What happened? Nothing, I'm fine. And she walked briskly toward the elevator. James stood for a moment and followed. What's going on? He's supposed to be guarding her. He immediately recognized the man who tried to hug Evelyn. She pushed his arms away. John, what do you want? How dare you show your face to me? Evelyn, I'm your husband. This is a temporary thing. I've already filed for an annulment. What annulment? I'll show you. The sound of breaking glass rang in John's head. No, he won't give up his dream. Evelyn is his wife. When he dresses up, he'll look cool too. He won't invent something so simple. He'll invent something worthwhile because they have money. Evelyn, you just don't realize what the future holds. What future? Do you want me to tell you? I don't. And don't even come near me. You're nothing but trouble, John. Learn to live on your own. I don't get it. Are you serious? Yeah, I'm dead serious. John grinned wickedly. You mean you need John to get you out of the mud, but you don't need John to get you out of the money? I repaid you handsomely. In case you haven't forgotten, I've been working off your debt. You gave me away just like a thing so that I could earn money for your entertainment. John couldn't take it anymore. You shouldn't have done that. I was getting ready. I bought flowers. Who needs you like that? You can't even have children. You're an inferior. Evelyn looked at him. If anyone in this life is incomplete, it's you. John didn't realize how it happened. It was just so painful to realize that nothing would change, that he would not be able to live a beautiful and rich life. And he already had so many images in his head. He hit Evelyn and swung again. All the hurt and pain was in his fist. John wanted to cry, and she was to blame for everything. It didn't work the second time. Some man kicked him so hard that John bent down and gulped for a long time. Hotel staff rushed to them, and someone called the police. 2 weeks later, Evelyn and James arrived in the village. Benjamin had been taken into custody by people who were competent in the matter. He was in more trouble than you could count. Nancy had not left the house at all. Benjamin owed wages to the whole village. Evelyn knew perfectly well that she had to talk to the people. Rumors were circulating, but people didn't know what was what, and that was why they were so gloomy. The village people, who had always preferred stability and dimensionality, were very frightened when a large crowd gathered near their car. Evelyn spoke up. The only thing left was to borrow money for flowers. He couldn't go to his wife empty-handed, could he? Evelyn studied the papers. For the past hour, she had been familiarizing herself with the techniques that helped people get back on their feet. It was confusing at first, then interesting, and by the end of the reading, she was sure it was a real miracle. She had even read many testimonials when even those who were considered hopeless started walking. I mean, it's so necessary, but I understand it's all just overseas. Yes, there is something like that here, but only in the capital. Evelyn thought for a moment. James, correct me if I'm wrong, if such a hospital is located in nature, but, for example, in our village, it would be more useful, wouldn't it? The man smiled faintly. What can I say? Well done. Immediately grasped the essence, all thought out. Of course. You see, without walks, sunbaths, and all that, the treatment is much longer. It's a pity Benjamin took our village. We have such nature there. You know, Evelyn, you and I are alike after all. I really liked it there too. Everything is so real, so natural, isn't it? And Benjamin, perhaps it's time to take care of him. To free the village from his yoke. Is that possible? Nothing is impossible in this world, especially if you have money. By the way, I looked at the location of the houses. It would make a great hospital, where the strongest of the world can improve their health. And that's money, and that's a lot of money, and that's jobs. James, if we do it, we'll be the biggest smarties of all. He smiled. After Evelyn had returned from her girls' camping trip, he had not recognized her at first. When he did, he was confused. She couldn't have been that beautiful. When he realized she could have been, he finally died. Now, the most important thing was not to show her how he felt about her, because it would turn out that he had come along with the money to the heiress. They discussed some details, and James went to his room. The phone rang. "Evelyn, there's a man here asking for you. He's dying to see you." "Who?" "It's your husband." "My what?" "My husband. I'll be right down." "You can't let him in here." She left the room and ran into James. "Evelyn, your face is gone." "What happened?" "Nothing. I'm fine." And she walked briskly toward the elevator. James stood for a moment and followed. What's going on? He's supposed to be guarding her. He immediately recognized the man who tried to hug Evelyn. She pushed his arms away. "John, what do you want? How dare you show your face to me?" "Evelyn, I'm your husband. This is a temporary thing. I've already filed for an annulment." "What annulment? I'll show you." The sound of breaking glass rang in John's head. No, he won't give up his dream. Evelyn is his wife. When he dresses up, he'll look cool too. He won't invent something so simple. He'll invent something worthwhile because they have money. "Evelyn, you just don't realize what the future holds." "What future?" "Do you want me to tell you?" "I don't. And don't even come near me. You're nothing but trouble, John. Learn to live on your own." "I don't get it. Are you serious?" "Yeah, I'm dead serious." John grinned wickedly. "You mean you need John to get you out of the mud, but you don't need John to get you out of the money? I repaid you handsomely. In case you haven't forgotten, I've been working off your debt. You gave me away just like a thing so that I could earn money for your entertainment." John couldn't take it anymore. "You shouldn't have done that. I was getting ready. I bought flowers. Who needs you like that? You can't even have children. You're an inferior." Evelyn looked at him. "If anyone in this life is incomplete, it's you." John didn't realize how it happened. It was just so painful to realize that nothing would change, that he would not be able to live a beautiful and rich life. And he already had so many images in his head. He hit Evelyn and swung again. All the hurt and pain was in his fist. John wanted to cry, and she was to blame for everything. It didn't work the second time. Some man kicked him so hard that John bent down and gulped for a long time. Hotel staff rushed to them, and someone called the police. 2 weeks later, Evelyn and James arrived in the village. Benjamin had been taken into custody by people who were competent in the matter. He was in more trouble than you could count. Nancy had not left the house at all. Benjamin owed wages to the whole village. Evelyn knew perfectly well that she had to talk to the people. Rumors were circulating, but people didn't know what was what, and that was why they were so gloomy. The village people, who had always preferred stability and dimensionality, were very frightened when a large crowd gathered near their car. Evelyn spoke up. "You all have known me since I was a little girl. I've never slacked off, never did a bad thing. And most importantly, I loved our village. I'll answer the most important questions right away. Yes, I received an inheritance. Yes, I bought back from Benjamin everything he had bought here." The crowd erupted in amazement. "Wow, so now you're going to put up a factory too?" Evelyn smiled. "No, I wanted to consult with you. The people waited tensely. She handed out little books to everyone about the technique for the sick and told them at the same time, "We can save all the nature, make a name for ourselves, make a lot of jobs. If you all say no, nothing will happen. I promise you." There was no arguing. Grandfather Mason, who was the oldest in the village, came out to the people and said, "I think we can trust Evelyn. If it's true, our village will be famous all over the world." When we got back to town, we decided that we should celebrate the beginning of a successful business. James was a little too gloomy. "What's the matter with you? You don't seem happy about our success." "Of course I am. Except I realized one thing today. You don't need me anymore. You can do this on your own. I can leave." When we got back, I booked a ticket, leaving in the morning. Evelyn realized it was bound to happen sooner or later. But why now? Why not later someday? She could see she liked him. She couldn't let him go. "James?" "Yes." "James, could you reschedule the flight?" "Reschedule? Do you still need me here?" "Yes, I do." He shrugged. Well, he would suffer for her a little longer. It was unbearable to be around the person he was about to lose. "All right, what time do you want to reschedule the flight?" He picked up the phone. "In the next life. In this one, I'm not letting you go." James slowly raised his eyes to her, looked at her for a long time, then said, "And I don't want you to think I stayed for the money. I don't, but everyone will think so. Do you care what everyone else thinks?" James smiled. "Evelyn, you're just scared. You don't love me, do you? Do you?" And then he blushed. "And I do, but—" "Then I'll drop everything and come with you." In a second, Evelyn was in James's arms. He kissed her and repeated, "I've had one desire lately, to kiss you. Now for the rest of your life you'll have to put up with me around you." "And I agree." Evelyn laughed happily.